Could I please have the roll call?
Councilmember Abdelgawad.
Here.
Councilmember Barber.
Present.
Councilmember Berenson.
Present.
Councilmember Burke.
Present.
Councilmember Sirko.
Present.
Councilmember Holman.
Present.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Present.
Councilmember Townsend.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no presentations or awards this evening, nor do we have anyone that's signed up for personal appearances outside of the public hearing. So I will move on to staff reports. Is there a staff report, Mr. Fearborn?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Kraft to make a staff report for Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. In addition to my written report, just wanted to let you know that our annual street preservation project will be starting shortly. We don't have an exact start date, whether they're going to start this week or after Labor Day, but we will be putting things out on social media as soon as we get a finalized schedule from the contractor. That concludes my staff report.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any questions? Thank you, sir. Mr. Fearborn?
Thank you, Mr. Kraft. I would ask Mr. Mustine to make a report for the Parks and Recreation Department.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, members of the council. I too submitted a written staff report, but I did want to just say a note of thanks for those that came to Hawk Ridge Park last Thursday and helped us do a ribbon cutting for that wonderful facility. Again, thank you to the council and the residents and everybody for providing the GO bond for that, and it's just a great amenity we have now. Also want to say thank you to volunteers from the Optimist Club, from Community Bank of Raymore, South Metro Fire Department, our PD, and so many more for making our annual mini mud run a huge success. We had right at 384 kids registered for the event this year, and it's our biggest and just continues to grow every year. So it's a great event. Thank you for everybody who came out. And finally, just wanted to remind everybody that with our new amenities at Hawk Ridge Park, our Walter Buck Memorial Fishing Derby is coming up Saturday, September 14th. It is 9 to 11 a.m. and it's for kids up to 15 years old. Get to fish for free. We got lots of prizes, lots of volunteers, a lot of stuff going on. So I have everybody come out.
Thank you, Nathan.
That
Any
concludes my
questions?
report.
Thanks, Nathan.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Fearborn?
Thank you, Mr. Mustine. I would ask Mr. Icky to make a staff report for the Communications Department.
Thank you, sir. Wanted to just thank council members as well as members of the public who came out to the annual Arts Commission Summer Scene Festival at Centerview this past Saturday. Typically, we hold this event in June at TB Hanna, but due to some construction and some changes in scheduling, we moved it to Centerview. Turned out to be a great facility, had lots of compliments on folks who had not been to Centerview yet, and it really turned out to be a great venue for Sounds of South Kansas City, which is our brand new local community band, Betts and Clark, which is a bluegrass duo, and our own Detective Shepard in The Heat ended out the night playing some great cover bands and some our cover music as well as some originals. Had about a dozen artists, had more than 300 people vote in the chair contest. If you've not had a chance to see some of the photos from the event posted by Ms. Harmer, you should definitely go to the Raymore Arts Commission Facebook page and take a look. Unfortunately, Ms. Harmer had another commitment tonight, but I did want to personally thank her. This was the first year that I truly got to take a step back and be a true spectator and visitor to the Summer Scene Arts and Music event. She took full control of this, and I think it really shows in the new venue, some of the different artists, and the kind of the displays that we had there. So I wanted to thank her for all of the work that she did with that. I think we had a lot of positive comments at the event, as well as a lot of positive comments after about the facility and the music as well. As you probably noticed, the art here has been removed. The walls are a bit bare. We are getting ready to transition to our new fall artists. Wanted to thank Ethan Holman for his artwork that was here this summer, as well as Chris Palmer, who is a teacher out at the middle school, for bringing her student artwork to City Hall. That is all I have for my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Icky, great job on that, by the way. I did attend Saturday night and forego watching the Chiefs game, which I think many people did, because we kind of had a light crowd, but the ones that were there really enjoyed it. It was a great event. And I hope those that had their booths set up inside Centerview were happy with the turnout.
Yes, sir.
So I think there were more inside than there were outside with regard to that. Thank you, sir. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Mr. Icky. Just a reminder, next Monday night, Labor Day, we will not be calling the council into session, so you get a night off.
All right. Okay, thank you.
That concludes staff reports this evening, sir.
Any questions of Mr. Fearborn? If not, we'll move on with the agenda. We have no committee reports tonight. We do have a fairly large consent agenda with 3 items on there. I would entertain a motion to dispose of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented to include item A, City Council minutes from the meeting of August 12, 2019. Item B, Recreation Park Pedestrian Bridge, acceptance and final payment. And item C, acceptance of public improvements, Heritage Hills 6th plat.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Mrs. Belgawad.
Just real quick, I want to share, I know when we first started looking at that bridge at Rec Park, I kind of shared that some of the neighbors over there weren't super happy about the concrete bridge, but I have heard several compliments about how that looks, so.
Good.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Now move on to unfinished business. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3482 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3482 by title only, an ordinance pursuant to Section 67.110 of the revised statutes of Missouri levying general and special taxes in the city of Raymore, Missouri for the year 2019.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3482 setting the 2019 tax levy.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3482. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3479 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3479 by title only, an ordinance of the city of Raymore, Missouri authorizing the city manager to enter into a street improvement reimbursement agreement with Hy-Vee, Inc. to construct a right turn lane for eastbound Foxwood Drive at its intersection with Fox Ridge Drive.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of the second reading of Bill 3479.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3479 Foxwood Drive right turn lane reimbursement agreement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3479. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3478 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3478 by title only, an ordinance of the city of Raymore, Missouri establishing a procedure to disclose potential conflicts of interest and substantial interest for certain officials and candidates for elective offices.
And just to clarify, this is the annual renewal of this. We do it on an annual basis,
We
don't
do it on an annual basis. That's
Okay.
correct, sir.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3478 financial disclosure ordinance.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3478. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3480 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3480 by title only, an ordinance of the city of Raymore, Missouri authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Central Salt LLC for supply delivery of bulk road salt.
Thank you. I assume, Mr. Crash, you read the Farmer's Report, the Farmer's Almanac, suggesting it's going to be a tough winter again on us this year. We're ready, though, right? Okay. I would entertain a motion to dispose of the second reading of Bill 3480.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3480, award of contract for bulk road salt.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3480. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Can I please have the second reading of Bill 3481 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3481 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Redford Construction Company for the Owen Good Force Main Project, City Project Number 19-326-201, in the amount of $563,180, and authorizing the city manager to approve change orders within established budget constraints.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to dispose of the second reading of Bill 3481.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3481, award of contract Owen Good Force Main Project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded to approve the second reading of Bill 3481. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. We'll now move on to new business. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3483 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3483 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, vacating platted street right-of-way in the Remington subdivision.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Public hearing, sir.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll open the public hearing at this time and ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Cataret to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. The City of Raymore is requesting to move forward with the proposed vacation of two portions of unutilized right-of-way that exist within the Remington subdivision to the east, or that exist along Hampton Drive, west of Loris Drive in that subdivision. I've included within the staff report before you this evening two photographs that depict the subject properties as they exist today. You'll note that on the south side of Hampton Drive of Lot 165 of the Remington subdivision is the property at 1111 Hampton Drive, and on the north side of Hampton Drive at Lot 166 exists the property at 614 Loris Drive. Because this item does require a public hearing, tonight's meeting was advertised in the August 8th edition of the Raymore Journal, and items of record for the request include the mailed notices to adjoining property owners, the notice of publication in the Raymore Journal, the Unified Development Code, the application itself, the growth management plan, and the staff report. The Remington 4th plat, where the subject property exists, was initially approved by the city on April 14th of 2003. When that preliminary plat was approved by the city, the subdivision initially contemplated the future construction of a north-south roadway that would eventually extend past the western boundary of that plat that would intersect Hampton Drive. When the Remington second plat was approved, the subject right-of-way was dedicated to the city for the construction of that future roadway as part of an additional subdivision phase at a later date. When the preliminary plan and MOU for the Creekmore subdivision was approved on January 26th of 2004, that preliminary plat contemplated a slightly different alignment of a north-south roadway, which is the current alignment of Fox Ridge Drive today. The Southern Hills at Creekmore second plat was approved by the city on March 14th, 2005. And that subdivision included the extension of Hampton Drive through the subdivision that exists and connects to Creekmore today. The subject right-of-way abuts two single-family homes within the Remington subdivision, as well as platted common area that exists within the Creekmore area as well. Notices were sent of this request to the three adjoining property owners that abut the proposed right-of-way, and all three property owners consented to the vacation of the proposed right-of-way. Typically, as outlined by City Code, when right-of-way is vacated, the statutory right of reversion of the owners and the abutting property allows that vacated property to essentially be dispersed between the adjoining property owners down the property line. However, because the platted right-of-way was originally dedicated and created as part of the Remington subdivision and not the Creekmore subdivision, the property owners within the Remington subdivision at the two properties that I mentioned have been made aware of the request and have agreed to maintain maintenance of those two pieces of right-of-way. The engineering department has reviewed the application and recommended approval of the request. The Planning Commission at its August 20th meeting voted 6-0 to approve the request and submitted their proposed findings of fact for your consideration. Looking forward to the schedule. Should the council make a recommendation on the item tonight, it will move forward for second reading at your September 9th, 2019 meeting. Staff does recommend that the City Council accept the proposed findings of fact and approve case 19016 Remington Estates right-of-way vacation upon first reading. That concludes staff report. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for you, Mr. Gress. I believe I read it correctly that the land that is being vacated is then being divided between the property owners that have that parcel, or is that, am I confused?
No, you're reading that correctly. So the area that is identified in your staff report is highlighted in yellow. The adjoining property owners within the Remington subdivisions would then assume that area that is being vacated.
Any other questions? Ms. Abdelwood?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It looks like in the pictures that the property's cared for already. Are those property owners pretty much already taking care of it?
For the most part, yes, they have already assumed that responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tolman, did you have anything? Nope, nothing to add. Anyone else? Thank you. As this is a public hearing, if anyone from the public would like to talk to or speak to this issue, please step forward, state your name and address for the record. Try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and I would entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3483, vacation of right-of-way for the Remington Estates subdivision.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3483. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Okay, please have the first reading of Bill 3484 by title only.
The first reading of Bill 3484 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending the zoning map from A Agricultural District to PUD Planned Unit Development District, a 25.7 acre tract of land located east of Dean Avenue, north of North Cass Parkway in Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. As this item also requires a public hearing, I will open the public hearing at this time and ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Gress to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I'll call on the applicant to make a brief presentation to the City Council. Prior to that, because the applicant has prepared a presentation for the council this evening, I would like to take control of your monitor so that you can follow along in the presentation as it proceeds.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name
Please
is
state
Bill
your name.
Moore.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
My name is Bill Moore. I'm an attorney with Rouse Fretz, White Goss, Gentile Rhodes. Our offices are located at 4510 Bellevue Avenue, Kansas City, Missouri. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Jake Lovelace, Griffin Riley Property Group. Also here tonight is Jeremy Powell with Powell CWM, Inc., the engineers who designed this project. So for this evening, for this presentation, what I would like to do with your consent, Mr. Mayor, is turn this over to Jake, who will make some comments with respect to the project that he is proposing to construct at this location, followed by Jeremy, who will get up and make some comments with respect to some of the engineering and design issues. Finally, with your permission, I will come back to the podium, make a few concluding remarks with respect to kind of how we got here with the original MOU and some final related items.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Jake?
Good evening, members. Jake Lovelace, Griffin Riley Property Group, 21 Southeast 29th Terrace, Lee Summit, Missouri. David, help me out. So tonight, I'm very excited to bring to you guys a project that, quite honestly, I've looked at here in the Raymore area for around 3 years at this point. I've spoken with a number of members of the staff here over that time. I've spoken with local landowners. I've looked at multiple different concepts here. I've evaluated the market in a number of different ways, and I'm very pleased tonight to bring to you guys a project that we believe will fit in very well with the city of Raymore, a city which I'm very, very familiar with through previous experience. So Griffin Riley Property Group is a company that began in 2017, but our ties with Raymore run much deeper than that. So prior to Griffin Riley Property Group, I was with Summit Custom Homes, and as a member of Summit Custom Homes, was part of constructing over 200 homes in the Raymore area in the last 15 years or so, and 200 homes which we're very proud to have brought to the Raymore area and have brought a number of strong residents here, strong product here, as positive contributions to the city of Raymore. So although we're newer to commercial real estate, obviously our development ties are very deep, having developed multiple projects over a number of years and being the largest single-family builder in Kansas City for the past 6. Currently, since 2017, the beginning of 2017, we have either constructed or acquired over 850,000 square feet of commercial and for-rent residential product. So, again, local company, local ownership. We're right down the road from you guys. I currently have a project that's going on at 150 and 291. I'm out there every week. The same thing will happen here in Raymore with this project. I'm not going anywhere. I will be here every week, sometimes multiple times a week, to make sure that this project goes as intended. So the project that we're here to discuss tonight is a project called The Venue. The Venue is 51 buildings with 204 homes across approximately 26 acres. As you can see on this slide here, we have a tremendous amount of green space that's associated here with the project. We have strategically placed amenities, which we have a playground here, we have pickleball here, we have dog park here, we have clubhouse and pool here, we have a large water feature that's going to be a retention pond here, and we have additional dry detention areas that we'll have here as well. Along with this, if you guys can see on your site, the green area that we have at the top here back to what would be the east, this is existing tree lines. So this is the natural buffer that we have here on this beautiful site. The site is a beautiful one, but it is topographically challenged. So there is a lot of contours on this site. We developed a plan, Powell CWM has developed a plan where we maintain those contours and we actually structure our buildings with those contours while maintaining the fantastic natural buffers that we have out there already. So the product that we're here to bring to you guys today is a product that's been through a number of different iterations. It's very much a live product that we continue to work on and through with modern and contemporary elevations and floor plans. 2 to 3 bedroom units starting at a roughly 1,300 square feet and moving up. We have full and partial basements. We have walkout basements on approximately half of the units that we have here. We have 1 and 2 car garages with full driveways. We have additional off-street parking that we've layered in. We have luxury interior finishes. So I alluded to it a little bit with the overall site plan, but we believe one of the things that's really going to separate our project from some of the other projects in the market is the amenities that we're going to include. So pool, a clubhouse, pickleball court, dog park, kids play set, play area, attached private garages, on-site, full-time maintenance department, and leasing agents. We will have people out there all the time. This is a fully staffed project. Regarding the finishes, I included one rendering of an actual unit with many of the same finishes and fixtures that we'll actually have in there. I included another one that's an actual unit that's finished with those exact same products. We will have quartz countertops. We'll have upgraded fixtures. We'll have stainless steel appliances. We'll have, like I mentioned, the attached garages that are there for convenience of the owners. We will have the multiple elevations that I started to show, which we're continuing to work through. We'll have multiple different floor plans. So as of this point, we have 4 different floor plans. And then multiple different color schemes and material boards that we'll use to be able to set apart all these different elevations that we have on this project. So regarding the actual design, to talk about that a little bit. Again, we've been through a number of different iterations. It's very much a live design that we continue to work through to make sure that it's tailored absolutely right for the city of Raymore, listening to staff's comments, the comments of our neighbors. But the reason why is based on what we see in market trends, based on the success that we've seen here locally in Raymore. With the project at Oak Ridge that's having wild success as far as with its lease ups and its lease rates. The lofts at Fox Ridge, which you all recently approved with modern contemporary architecture, and then also market data. So a real estate report by John Burns Consulting found in 2018 report that over 50% of millennials prefer modern contemporary architecture. This is the way things are moving. It's the reason why you guys have had so much success with those concepts here recently. So why Raymore? I mentioned that I've really been looking at this in Raymore for 3 years. You know, I've spoken with members of staff intermittently for up to 3 years. We've spoken on this project for approaching a year. The reason is the occupancy rate of the existing units. Raymore does not have enough units for the demand that exists. Currently, right now at this point, as of last week when I checked, 96% is the occupancy rate of your for rent residential units. Under 6% since 2014. So since 2014, you've only had 6% occupancy for folks looking for a home in Raymore that they could potentially rent. The market rate on average is $1,137. So again, we feel like with us bringing in a product that's higher end, more amenities, that we will have no problem driving those rent rates up in the $1,450 and up range that we're planning. So other contributing factors as far as future growth. Right now, Cerner has between 3,000 and 6,000 employees at their new campus, which is 11 miles away. That campus, they're planning on that increasing up to that 6,000 employee number, I believe the first quarter of next year. By 2025, that's going to be 16,000 employees at that location that's 11 miles away, straight shot down the highway. Right now, at Honeywell, there's 4,500 employees. That's 6 miles away. And I can tell you, because we just began leasing up our project a handful of miles farther down the road, that we already have multiple Honeywell employees that have come over and have taken up some of our units that we have over at the residences at Echelon. These are people that choose to rent. This is a renter by choice. Someone who's paying $1,450 a month is somebody who wants to have the flexibility of a home that they can rent. They want to have the amenities there. They want to not have to take care of exterior maintenance. They want all those things provided for them. But $1,450 a month with an average income of 3 times that on a monthly basis is somebody that chooses to rent and wants to be able to find a home in Raymore. So one other thing that we heard when in some of the different comments that we had from both our town hall meeting, our charrette, and then also in our planning commission meeting was regard to property values. And so what I did was, and it's a little bit tougher for you guys to see up there, but basically Manor Homes is up at the very top here. It's right here where I'm highlighting. And the point of this slide in general is to show that abutting homes, one of them that's actually touching Manor Homes, that property, had a 10% price or had a 10% property valuation increase over the period of time from 2015 to 2018. Here's 3 homes that are directly either touching or are directly adjacent to that property, which is the nearest property that we had that was a residential for rent property that we could compare. They have between 10 and 11% property increase in valuation over the 2015 to 2018 timeframe. I expanded that out. I went all the way out to next to where we're at, so miles away from Manor Homes of Eagle Glen. They had that same 9 to 11% property valuation increase over that same time frame. And so the point that I'm making here is, regardless of proximity to rental product, those homes increased in property values the same as the other projects did that were touching or adjacent. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill, just so we can talk a little bit more about how we got here with the plan from the developer back 25 years ago. Yes, sir.
Mr. Holman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. A good presentation. I had a question. You mentioned in our packet, it talks about the, I guess you would call it the target rental amount of $1,450.
Right.
But you've talked about, different units here, different maybe numbers of bedrooms and garages. So is that a median range? Is that from the bottom and it goes up?
That is a median range. So I would say, honestly, it's closer to the bottom. I'd say our entry level units are probably going to start in the $1,350 range, but I don't see us getting any less than that on an entry product. So it will start there, depending on the finishes that we have as far as a basement finish and the total square footage that we have of the unit. Bedrooms, which we're planning on no units being smaller than 2-bed, 2.5 bath, but starting there and up. So $1,350 will likely be the bottom end of our range, but we could go up all the way to $2,000 a month, depending on the finishes that we have if we do a finish in the walkout basement and things like that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Any other questions before I turn it over to Bill for a moment to talk with us? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Nice presentation. So I want to just kind of conclude, taking us back to the beginning of why we're here tonight for this location. And it goes back 25 years ago. And as you can see from the slide, this property was actually subject to an annexation. And at the time of the annexation, there was a master plan that was created and adopted by the city at the time the property was annexed. That master plan was a well thought out, kind of a state-of-the-art, even ahead of its time in some sense, master plan community to cover approximately 1,700 acres. This master plan community included property uses such as single family, commercial, and also attached single family and multifamily housing. So if you would see the center piece right here, that is the property that's the subject of your hearing tonight. And that's the piece that we're asking for your consent to rezone to PUD. As you can see from that slide at that location, it is immediately adjacent to planned commercial, which is also then adjacent to the interstate. And if you look below it, there's additional commercial that's in the plan for this particular master plan area, as well as apartments and other types of uses. And in addition, I think you saw it a little bit from an earlier slide that Jake had that showed the amount of open space that was part and parcel to this annexation. There was a significant amount of property that was dedicated to the city as open space, and also property that was dedicated to the school for construction of a school within this area. So again, without belaboring the point, it was a master plan that included all uses for the future for the development of 1,700 acres. Jake was looking for a place to locate this product, and that popped right out. That is the ideal location for this product. It is, as I said, it borders on commercial. It buffers to other single-family uses. So it's an ideal spot for this particular type of use. So I think just to conclude, because I know there's going to be a long evening here this evening, I just want to make a few final remarks, and that's with respect to the staff report that you're going to hear in just a few minutes. With respect to the findings of fact and conclusions of law, we are very comfortable with those findings of fact and conclusions of law that the Planning Commission made. With respect to the proposed memorandum of understanding that was also recommended to you for adoption this evening, we are very comfortable with the MOU as it's being proposed. And finally, we're very comfortable with staff comments. With that, Mr. Mayor, we will stand for any questions.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Brown? Did your engineer have a report?
Oh, I'm sorry. We've decided for the sake of time that if there are questions with respect to the engineering,
Okay.
Jeremy is here and available for comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Gress?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the applicant mentioned in their presentation, Jake Lovelace, representing Griffin Riley Property Group, is requesting rezoning of classification of zoning of roughly 25 acres of land at the northeast corner of Dean Avenue and North Gas Parkway from the existing agricultural designation to a PUD planned unit development, as well as approval of a preliminary development plan for that very same property. I've included within the staff report this evening several photographs that depict the existing conditions of the property as it exists today. And you'll note in your staff report again, the existing zoning of the property is agricultural as it has remained since it was annexed into the city in 1994. Existing uses surrounding this property include single-family detached residential to the north, the Meadowood of the Good Ranch subdivision, undeveloped future commercial land to the south, on the south side of North Gas Parkway and Hubach Hill, the Good Parkway and the Linear Park there to the east, as well as single-family residential within the Stonegate subdivision, and additional undeveloped future commercial land on the west side of Dean Avenue as part of the Good Ranch as well. The future land use map within the growth management plan does identify this property as appropriate for low-density development, and the major thoroughfare plan map within that same plan classifies Dean Avenue and North Cass Parkway both as minor arterial roadways, and it classifies Fox Ridge Drive as a minor collector. All of the proposed roads within this proposed subdivision would be classified as local roads. Because tonight's meeting does require a public hearing, tonight's meeting was advertised again in the August 8th edition of the Raymore Journal, and items of record for the case include the mailed notices to adjoining property owners, the notice of publication in the Raymore Journal, the Unified Development Code, the application itself, the growth management plan, the Good Ranch Community Land Use Plan, the staff report, the applicant's proposed development plan, the comments from adjacent property owners, the Good Neighbor informational meeting summary and comments, as well as the draft memorandum of understanding. I will note that following the dispersion of your packets for this evening, staff did receive additional signatures and additional petitions that have been placed for you at the dais for your consideration this evening. I will note that as this project moves forward through the process, those will be added to the record for this project. Staff did include the rezoning requirements for a zoning map amendment as outlined by city code, and looking into some of the history of this property as far as how we got there where it is today. The applicant mentioned and referenced the Good Ranch Community Master Plan. That plan was initially approved by the city in 1994, initially contemplated a mixture and variety of both residential, commercial, and light industrial uses spread over the entirety of its 1,700 acres. Other residential phases within that development, including Wood Creek, Stonegate, Meadows, and Meadowood of the Good Ranch, have been approved and completed over the last several years. Most recently, the Prairie View of the Good Ranch subdivision was approved by the City Council on November 27th, 2017. The developer and property owner of that phase have recently started construction of that single-family subdivision. Within the Good Ranch master plan, that plan identified this specific property, which is called out as Tract 2 on the land use plan, identified that specific property as appropriate for the development of attached single-family development, which is consistent with the request this evening. As required by City Code, a Good Neighbor informational meeting was held on August 7th, 2019. At that meeting, roughly more than 90 residents attended that meeting in addition to city staff, the applicant, as well as the project engineer. A summary of the questions, comments, and answers that were asked at that meeting have been included in your staff report for your consideration in the request. The Engineering Department and Public Works Department have reviewed the request and indicated that the proposed plan does comply with the design standards that have been adopted by the City of Raymore, and they do recommend approval of the application. Specific comments that they referenced have been attached to your staff report, and as always, Mr. Krass is sitting here to my left if the council has any questions specific to the engineering of the project. Moving on to some of the specific comments identified by staff. Again, the Good Ranch land use plan that was initially approved when this land was initially annexed into the city in 1994 identified this subject property, Tract 2, as well as Tract 3 and a portion of Tract 4 as appropriate for the development of attached single-family dwellings. The Good Ranch land use plan, as well as the associated MOU, which has previously been referenced, provides guidance and assurance that the developer and property owner agree to develop the land in accordance with the approved land use plan, as well that the city agrees to rezone property in accordance with that very same plan. The land use plan for the Good Ranch community, looking at the history of that, it's interesting to note that since its inception in 1994, the development and implementation of that has almost been spot on with how it was approved back in 1994, with the exception of two minor changes. When you look at the Meadows of the Good Ranch and Meadowood of the Good Ranch subdivisions, those have been developed today as attached or detached single-family neighborhoods. What's important to note that when this plan was initially approved in 1994, those tracts of land were also identified as appropriate for attached single-family development. It was at the request of the property owner at the time and the developer of those subdivisions, based on the market conditions and how the housing market was at that time, that land was at that point better suited, they thought, for the development of detached single-family units, which is why you see those out there today. It is staff's belief that it's important to note that when that amendment was made to the land use plan, it only applied to the tracts of land that comprise the Meadows and Meadowood subdivisions. The Tract 2, which the property we're discussing this evening, was left with its attached single-family designation at that time. And looking more specifically at the development overall, or the land use of attached single-family dwelling units, that is a use that's permitted by right under both the R3 medium-density residential district as well as the R3A multiple-family residential district. However, the Unified Development Code also allows a planned unit development, or a PUD, and allows one of those to be approved to accommodate the development of attached single-family homes within that zoning classification. In comparing the R3 and R3A zoning districts to a PUD, the specific creation and the purpose of a planned unit development is to allow for greater flexibility in the design and placement of buildings, yards, courts, overall circulation of the development, in exchange for the provision of platted common open space, amenities, and enhanced design. The following components of the proposed development are being included and necessitate the need for the request for a PUD this evening. You'll notice in your packet the applicant, and as they mentioned in their presentation, has provided a number of distinct building types, building elevations, and floor plans. The development proposes two variations of a standard front entry garage unit that has both a one-car and a two-car option, as well as a rear-loaded garage option. The units, which include a rear-loaded garage, will have vehicular or driveway access off of the proposed residential street, Cedar Crest Drive, with pedestrian or front door access located along Dean Avenue, with access provided via a private sidewalk to the front door of each of those units. It's staff's belief that the inclusion of a variety of building types will help mitigate the appearance of monotony within a single-family attached subdivision. In addition to that, the residential development includes a number of private open space and amenities that are spread throughout, including a playground, a pickleball court, a dog park, a pool and clubhouse, on-street guest parking areas, as well as centralized solid waste collection areas. The PUD, unlike the R3 or the R3A zoning designation, provide the proper mechanisms that allow the property owner to own, control, and maintain those common open spaces and those amenities that are being proposed this evening. In exchange for some of those amenities and the different items that are being proposed in this, one of the benefits of a PUD is it offers the flexibility to modify some of the zoning or development standards that would be initially included under those R3 and R3 zoning designations. And so in your staff report, I've included a table which outlines the development standards, including the setbacks, minimum lot sizes, building separation, building coverage, building heights, in relation to the request this evening. You'll see only very minor modifications have been requested based on what you see in your packet this evening. I touched a little bit based on the amenities. The Unified Development Code outlines the minimum requirements for parking as it pertains to specified uses within the Unified Development Code. Specifically for attached single-family dwelling units, the code requires a minimum of 2 spaces per dwelling unit. And those can be achieved through the provision of off-street garage spaces or off-street driveway spaces. Based on the proposal of 200 units within this development, a total of 408 spaces would be required by city code. And as I mentioned, as part of the amenity package that's being proposed, the applicant is providing within this development 47 additional on-street guest amenity spaces that would be provided for not only residents within the subdivision who may have additional cars, but also residents that may be visiting any of the residents within the subdivision at any time. Through the provision of the garage parking spaces, the full driveway spaces, as well as the on-street guest parking spaces, a total of 455 parking spaces are being proposed. And looking further at the overall breakdown of the total number of housing units that the city has within our community, including detached single-family, attached single-family, multifamily units, I've summarized basically the share of those units that can be classified into 3 different categories. You'll see that more than 83% of the housing units within the city are comprised of detached single-family dwellings. Moving on, you'll see that roughly a little under 14% of our overall housing stock is comprised of attached single-family units, including both duplex units and townhome units. Moving on, you'll see that anything that includes 5 or more dwelling units, think of your manor homes of Eagle Glen, those units in relation to the overall housing stock only comprise a little over 2% of the overall housing units within the city of Raymore. And looking further into that, trying to summarize the ownership characteristics of all of the housing units within the city, staff was able to utilize census data and American Community Survey data to break down the ownership characteristics of all the housing units within the city, whether they're owner-occupied or renter-occupied. And these numbers include attached and detached single-family units, as well as all multifamily units within the city. You'll see that within Raymore, 81% of the housing units, residential units within the city, are owner-occupied, and roughly 19% are renter-occupied. To put that in perspective, I've included a snapshot of the Kansas City metro area on both sides of the state line, with 67% of those being owner-occupied and only 33% being renter-occupied, and then took it a little bit further to give you a national snapshot of what the trend is across the nation. You'll see that 65% of all housing units across the nation are owner-occupied units, and 35% of those units are renter-occupied. Taking a step back, the applicant referenced again the well-thought-out plan that is the Good Ranch Community Master Plan. And a couple of the things that stand out with that development, particularly to staff as we were looking through this, is the positive planning principles that, even for its time in 1994, that this plan included within it. The Good Ranch Plan utilizes the interconnectivity of neighborhoods and similar land uses through the use of greenways and linear parks that you see there today, with the trail system that's been incorporated through the development of those neighborhoods, as well as the separation of sensitive land uses, including schools, single-family neighborhoods, light industrial or commercial uses from higher intensity uses through the use of natural buffers and land use transitions. And what I want to bring up on the screen here briefly to kind of explain that concept is a map that staff has created. So you notice within your map, or within your staff report this evening, I've included a map that identifies general land uses, single-family, retail, commercial, multifamily, attached single-family, throughout the city of Raymore. And you'll notice there's a common trend that exists not only along the Dean Avenue corridor, but most prominently along the 58 Highway corridor, where the city sees the majority of its commercial land uses. The Good Ranch Land Use Plan, the proposed attached single-family residential areas provide logical land use transition between the future commercial and light industrial uses that are proposed on the west side of the Dean Avenue and north and south sides of North Cass Parkway that separate the sensitive land uses, including single-family subdivisions, the school that has been built within this subdivision. It's that transition from the higher intensity uses that you see along Dean Avenue and Northcast Parkway as you make your way further into the Good Ranch development. And to kind of put that concept into perspective, if you look at other developments that have happened in the past throughout the city, including Timber Trails, the Remington subdivision, Town Center, you'll see a very similar transition or a trend or a principle, if you will, as you transition from the commercial uses that exist on 58 Highway. The further you get out from 58 Highway on those commercial uses, you'll see a transition to some sort of attached single-family or multifamily land use, whether that's townhomes, duplexes, or developments such as the Manor Homes at Eagle Glen. You'll see that very same type of transition all throughout Raymore along its highly trafficked corridors. In addition to the land use transition, the existing and future linear park system that exists in this area provides a substantial natural separation between the future commercial, light industrial, and higher density residential developments that are planned for the future, and separates those from the single-family subdivisions that exist on the east side of the creek and linear park system. The rezoning request was, as usual, shared with the Raymore Peculiar School District. In a correspondence with the superintendent of the school district, Dr. Monsis, it was indicated that the elementary school and middle school, particularly Stonegate Elementary, is roughly between 75 and 80% capacity, and they indicated that there is ample capacity to absorb any additional students or attendance that would be generated by development in this area. They also indicated that, you know, as the city grows, they grow as well, and they're just starting to begin their analysis or capacity evaluation, if you will, of the entire school district. So we have a really great working relationship with the school district, and we continue to do that as proposals and development move forward through the city. Additionally, as always, the request was also shared with the South Metro Fire District. The district was involved in a lot of the preliminary meetings as we met as part of our pre-application process, and at that time the district had no concerns with the proposed development. As outlined by city code, staff did send notice to the adjoining property owners that outlined the dates for the Good Neighbor meeting, informational meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing, as well as the City Council public hearing tonight. 43 residents that surround this property were notified, as well as HOA groups that surround those properties, and comments and concerns that were relayed to staff have been included in your staff report this evening. The applicant sort of touched on this in his presentation, but I wanted to reiterate some of the research that staff did as well. A primary concern that we heard both at the Good Neighbor meeting as well as the Planning Commission meeting was the perceived impact that multifamily or rental properties have on surrounding single-family developments. And so staff utilized the county assessment data that's available to do a analysis on property values over the last several years. Looking specifically at some of the multifamily or attached single-family developments that we have in the city currently, starting with the Skyview development that exists on the east side of the community. Immediately adjacent to those two developments are two newer single-family subdivisions, the Hidden Meadows as well as Monroe Park. Both of those subdivisions were built after the Skyview units were constructed back in the 1980s. It was indicated by staff that the values of those single-family homes closest to the Skyview units that were immediately adjacent to those units have steadily been increasing over the past 6 years. Additionally, adjacent to the Manor Homes apartment community are detached single-family homes within the Eagle Glen subdivision, another well-thought-out planned community within Raymore. It was identified that some of those homes that are they're as close as 80 feet to those multifamily units within the Manor Homes. Again, those property units or those property values of those single-family detached homes have been steadily increasing over the last 6 years as well. And then looking more specifically at the Creekmore subdivision, some of the homes that have built there initially when that subdivision was built, some of those homes are as close as 90 feet of the existing duplex units that were already existing when that subdivision was proposed. And again, the values of those homes that are closest to those duplex and multifamily units have also been increasing over the past 6 years. Last but not least, on several occasions, the council has heard from our economic development director, Mr. Matt Tapp. He reports to you very regularly on the status of different projects that he's working on, and that the conversations that he's having with developers, property owners, and projects throughout the area. It was shared with staff that there's two major topics that are shared with him when he's having those discussions with retail development or retail developers, and it's that traffic volumes that exist on Northcast Parkway and Dean Avenue are significantly below the threshold that's needed. The traffic volumes that attract commercial development to this type of area are significantly below that threshold. And additionally, residential development of higher density, specifically market rate apartments or townhomes near this area to attract the population that's needed to support that development is desperately needed in this area to attract that commercial development in the future. Matt Tapp is a great resource to our staff, and I always appreciate any input that I can get from him. The Planning Commission at their August 20th meeting did vote 5-1 to forward this item on to the City Council, and they did submit their proposed findings of fact for your consideration on tonight's request. Looking forward, or kind of summing up tonight's presentation, again, the Good Ranch Community Master Plan back in 1994 was contemplated a variety of land uses spread over the entirety of its 1,700 acres. The overall land use plan for the community identified this tract as appropriate for the future development of single-family attached homes. While portions of this area have been modified to allow for the development of detached single-family homes in the Meadows and Meadowwood, it's staff's belief that this property is still well-suited for the development of attached single-family homes. The Unified Development Code outlines the provisions for the development of attached single-family homes under the R3 and R3A zoning districts, subject to certain development standards. While the proposed PUD does allow for the development of attached single-family homes, it also provides the city, the general public, as well as the property owner more assurance and security relative to the quality of development that is proposed here this evening. The MOU, which is an agreement that is not required in the R3 or R3A zoning districts, ensures that the property will be developed in accordance with the approved preliminary plan that's here this evening. Given the variety of land uses that have been approved or being contemplated on the west side of Dean Avenue, north of North Guest Parkway, as part of the Good Ranch Master Plan, the proposed development provides a logical and well-planned land use transition that buffers the existing single-family subdivisions from the future commercial development and light industrial growth that is planned for the west side of Dean Avenue. Additionally, the preservation of the existing stream corridor and the placement of stormwater facilities provide an additional buffer between sensitive land uses from this property. Both Dean Avenue and North Guest Park were built as arterial roadways and were designed to accommodate both existing traffic as well as traffic that would be generated by future development within the Good Ranch community, as well as the surrounding areas. The recently completed Fox Ridge Drive was built as a collector roadway and provides logical connectivity to the proposed development, to the Stonegate Elementary School, and other access points to Dean Avenue. Based on existing traffic volumes, it was determined that there is ample capacity available for these roadways to absorb any additional traffic that would be generated by this development, as well as any other proposed developments that would happen in this area. In addition, in 2017, the City Council adopted the strategic plan that included a number of goals that are relative to providing quality, diverse housing options that meet the needs of not only our current population, but our future population as well. Within the existing housing stock that I touched on briefly, the city currently has housing options that include, but not limited to, detached single-family homes that exist on a golf course community within Creekmore, detached single-family homes on quarter-acre lots that may or may not have an HOA within the subdivision, large lot single-family homes, age-restricted single-family developments, duplex units, and townhome units with no amenities, as well as apartment complex units. Staff believes that what the city is currently lacking is a townhome or a cohesive townhome development that provides amenities within its own subdivision. The proposed development will meet that need that the city currently sees. Again, the Planning Commission did vote at its August 20th meeting 5-1 to accept the staff proposed findings of fact on case 19019, the venue of the Good Ranch, and forwarded to City Council with a recommendation of approval. And again, they did submit their proposed findings of fact for your consideration. That will conclude staff's lengthy report on this item. If there's any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
David, I have a couple before I open it up to the public comments. Could you talk a little bit more about the water retention engineering? And I don't know if Mr. Krass can talk to that. I know that we've received photos and videos in the last 24 hours with regard to the downpours that we've experienced and the water stream getting out of its banks there and onto the trail that exists. Could you talk to that a little bit with regard to what its intended purpose was and the design that exists today there?
Mr. Mayor, when the Good Ranch is proposed, they set aside greenways, which is and most of those are designated floodplains, and that is the areas that Wood Creek, the Meadows, and Stonegate use as detention facilities for stormwater runoff. So, and it's the area that's shown on blue up on your screen. So what those photos you got today is not unanticipated. In fact, it is by design that those areas flood. It's the floodplain it was set aside. What's unique about this development is they are going over and above in providing on-site detention facilities that would not be normally required as part of the Good Ranch development because they were utilizing the floodplain.
Okay. And then I had a second question follow-up with you, Mr. Gress. You mentioned that the parking capacity was 455, but you didn't say whether that was garaged or ungaraged. So I assume you're just talking about existing exterior pavement that's available for parking rather than someone potentially using the garage to park their vehicle, correct?
The Unified Development Code allows the parking requirement to be met through the provision of garage spaces, driveway spaces, to satisfy that requirement. Based on that code requirement, I did mention that I believe 408 spaces would be required based on the 204 proposed units. That requirement was satisfied through the provision of both garage spaces and driveway spaces.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think there's other questions of staff. Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Krass, on the water retention, on the preliminary plat, there's 3 detention ponds. There's the wet in the northeast corner, and then there's the proposed 2 dry. With regards to the 2 dry, are those going to leach or into the stormwater, or are they just going to kind of evaporate or dissipate into the, will they retain water as we had the water storms this past weekend, or how would they?
They will retain water during the storm events, and then through controlled outlet drain back dry.
Okay. And on the, well, I'll save for later because it's a question for the developer.
Okay. Wait, you can ask him now if you like.
On that northeast wet detention pond, for the developer, Mr. Lovelace, right now that's the one that seems to me, in looking at the images, that's the one closest to existing properties and the berm. I understand there's going to be some construction to clean up the berm and clean up that water retention pond as it is. But the tree line, and we've been briefed on, the tree line is no man's land. It's green space. It's not going to be touched. But what type of do you plan on landscaping, additional landscaping, to put in some additional buffer for those residents that are potentially in that northeast corner? Because it's a little sparse when I look at it, but based on you having to go in there and clean it up, it would become even more sparse. So I'm just concerned if your landscape plan is going to add some additional vegetation to kind of give them that buffer.
Sure. So specifically to that area that runs along there, I believe that's Fox Ridge Drive that runs up there. So along the drive there, we will have a type A buffer that goes in. So right now that doesn't currently exist, but we will add a type A buffer to that area right there to shield the neighbors that we have back to the north. And then on top of that, because of some of the feedback that we've heard, we thought a water feature right there in that wet detention area would be not only nice for us as a community, but also for the residents that are there to the north to, again, add additional buffer above and beyond. And that's something that we just discussed with staff following our planning commission meeting.
Perfect. And for the and can you explain in layman's terms, what does type A mean?
The exact details of it's probably better for Jeremy or
Is that
David.
evergreen trees? Is that roses? Is that, what is that?
Jeremy.
Not roses. No knockout roses. That was a comment on our
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Powell with Powell CWM, 3200 South State Route 291 in Independence, Missouri. The type A buffer is there's 3 types that we can have. One is a fenced type with plantings. The ones that we will probably go with is a low shrub area with trees along, I can't remember the exact spacing, 30, 40 feet. So it does provide a buffer all year round with the low shrubs.
Okay. And that's a part of the landscaping plan that will be submitted with the?
With the final development plan, that is when the landscape plan gets approved.
Okay.
Along with the street trees and the other plantings that are
Along the street
required.
trees along Dean Avenue?
Yep. And that is in the MOU that's being approved, as the type A buffer will be required. And in regards to the plantings around, or the existing trees, there will be some removed with the outflow structure, but it's going to be our priority to save as many as possible. So.
How do you make that determination? You have an arborist that comes in, or is just by accident the earth movers or take out a tree, or?
No, we'll set limits of non-disturbance. So a contractor would adhere to that, and it'd be his responsibility to replace anything that he damages.
Okay. And when you replace, if there's accidental damage, is it with similar growth or is it with seedling?
It is by plant unit typically.
Okay.
So.
Anything else? Mr. Burke?
Thank you. Well, while you're up here talking about trees, I looked at the MOU and I estimated, I got out a little thing and measured, and I believe that it looked like there were going to be over 200 street trees planted, because along Dean Avenue there would be planted, I think, every 50 feet, and then in the front of each unit, in units like 1 through 7, they were going to have one in each one in front of each building, because they have trees behind them, but then the other ones are going to have one for each resident. So if it's a fourplex, there'll be 4 trees in the front. Is that correct? I mean, that's what I read.
It'll be one per building.
One per building?
Yep.
Okay.
Along with the street trees at 50-foot spacing.
And then I guess I could address this question to you also. I also believe that I read that there would be no street parking because there's the extra 47 spaces provided in different locations. So there was going to be designated that they were not supposed to park on the street.
That was a
that the city
consideration
was
in the
going to
planning
do.
and zoning meeting. I don't know if there was a final decision, but as the mayor requested, we were going to revisit the number of off-street parking, and we do see many opportunities to add additional, and that's going to be our goal. So 47 is where we're starting. We will be increasing that as we move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to reiterate to the council and the audience, this is a preliminary plat, still preliminary in nature, changes can still be made, and then that final plat would have to be approved as well. So, wanted to just kind of reiterate that. Did you have something, Mr. Circo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, on the parking and on the no parking, I know I read here on the impacts and on transportation, it was stated to us that the streets within the proposed development will be restricted as no parking when the project is completed because of the lack of adequate spacing between driveways. Off-street parking is being also provided for additional parking, so you'll have additional for visitors parking as you go through the complex and the division, so visitors can park off the street in a separate parking.
Correct. It is adjacent to the roads, and that will be maintained by the property management.
Okay.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is probably more for staff, but as of right now, can you park on Dean Parkway? Is that allowed?
No, you cannot, sir.
Okay. There's no parking signs posted on that then? Okay, so we wouldn't have an issue with that, then that'd be a tow zone. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else before we go to public comments? Yes, Mr. Holman.
I had a question also for staff. By the way, Mr. Gress, very thorough and comprehensive presentation, very well presented. If someone could speak to, we received the various pages of the petition in our packet, and then we received another one tonight. The one that we received tonight, the wording is different than the one we received in our packet, and I still don't know. I apologize, I didn't go through and count the number of people that signed that petition and what the total was, and is there any kind of operational effect via our procedures based on the petition received, or is it just this certain number of people are saying they are opposed to the project?
Great question, sir. I'll start at the high level and kind of explain the 2 different types of petitions that could have been filed. Our city code allows, under a rezoning request, the opportunity for residents to submit a statutory petition, which, if successful, would require a supermajority at the council level to recommend approval or denial of any application. The Unified Development Code outlines the requirements to achieve that, being that it must obtain these signatures of landowners that own 30% of the land area within 185 feet around the subject property. So if you designate a 185-foot buffer, or donut, if you will, around this property, the signatures of roughly 30% of that land area has to be obtained in order for that to take effect. The issue with that is that within this area, nearly 80% of it is currently owned by the current property owner within that 185 feet. The other 17 to 18% is owned by the city, which you see along Good Parkway, the linear park that exists to the east. Unfortunately, only roughly a little under 3% is owned by individual property owners that could have put their signatures on that petition. The other option for residents was to file a general petition, which illustrates just a general opposition to the project overall. And in looking at the petitions that are before you this evening, that were included in your packet, staff received, I believe, a total of 4 separate petitions that have been submitted to you this evening. In comparing the signatures on all 4 of those individual documents, staff counted roughly 690 unique individual signatures that were included on those and were shared with you this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Barber.
Yeah, I have a question about the petition. The petition is not accurate. It says opposed rezoning of land from single family to multifamily. So this obviously is on the record. I'd like to go on the record to state that that's not accurate. It's agriculture to multifamily, correct?
It is actually, the request this evening is agricultural to attached single family,
Okay.
which under our zoning code does not coincide with a multifamily designation.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Well, we'll move on to public comments. Part of the public hearing tonight, just to reiterate, you please state your name and address for the record as you come to the microphone. Try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Let me remind you, I understand it's an emotional issue. Trust me, I've heard from many of you that are here in the room tonight. I know that it's emotional, and you believe that it is truly affecting you personally, and we understand that. We have the petitions. We have many of the comments that were made at the Planning and Zoning as part of the record. I would ask you tonight that in your comments, if you hear someone prior to you making the same argument or making the same opposition to that particular issue, please just say so and move on, because otherwise we can be here for quite a while with this many people, as this is the next level of this process as we move forward. So with that said, I would entertain the public to address the council on this issue. Please step forward, state your name and address for the record. As I said, keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, and let us know if you're in opposition or in support of this issue.
Good evening. Daniel Tuttle, 1522 Wildwood Circle. First, I'd like to state I'm a little bit disappointed in the both the developer and the report from the city, and the fact that we're still using the misleading statistics that we discussed last week in order to try to assuage property owners that our property values will not be negatively affected by this. In the developer's report, he talked about 2015 to 2018. In the city's report, we talked about the last 5 or 6 years. As most of us know, during that time, the U.S. was recovering from the recession, and as such, property values pretty much unanimously went up throughout the United States in response to that recovery. So to try and point these out as a matter of fact that we will not be negatively affected is misleading at best. I feel like if we were really trying to be assuaged as to the impact of our property values, we would have been shown some sort of at least comparable situation in which a unit development of this type were put in next to some, and especially I like to point out a higher end communities such as what the properties currently in the area are. I find it hard to believe that in the state of Missouri, or at least in a comparable situation in the Midwest, that there isn't that type of statistic that we could look at and thereby prove to the people that, hey, this is what's going to happen to your property values. The fact that it hasn't been shown to us, I feel, is either a fact that somebody hasn't done their due diligence, or the fact that it would go in direct opposition to what's being proposed. The fact that those statistics are still being used, like I said, is a disappointment. I'd go further to say a lot through these proceedings we've been told about how this plan has been in the development for 24 years, which tells me that the city of Raymore was willing to make a commitment to this plan over 24 years ago. My question would be for the developer if they would be willing to show that kind of commitment back to Raymore. And a lot of people may call this far-fetched, but I would like to know if they would be willing to make some sort of agreement in which they could assuage some of our fears by committing to not selling this property to someone who would then lax on the upkeep, the maintenance, that is going to end up lowering the property values as soon as a recession or a downturn hits, and will end up with a lower income property here in which that we obviously have all the issues that would come with that. And, you know, I wouldn't even have to ask the 24 years like Raymore is willing to commit to them. I would ask, you know, give me 10 years. 10 years in which we're not being sold this to someone else or allowing the luxury price point to be dropped down in which it becomes a low-income housing development. Lastly, my only other point I'd like to point out kind of goes back to our closing arguments from the Planning and Zoning Commission of last week, Mr. Mayor, in which you claimed that you had to represent all of Raymore and not just the citizens, but you had to include everyone, and that includes the business. And I understand your position and such, but I would like to point out that it's the people that voted yourself and the members of the council in, correct? And you are to be our voice in this small government and be the voice of the people. And I feel like I can speak for a lot of us when saying that we're here.
Could I please?
Sorry. That we're here and our voice is reaching out, but a lot of us feel like it's just not being heard. I thank you for your time. I would actually, if it's okay with the council, I'm going to step outside so that would allow another person to come in and be heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Daniel Tuttle, Tuttle. Have a great evening.
Terry Woods, I live at 309 North Park Drive. This isn't even my area. However, we found ourselves in a similar situation a couple months ago back in June when they wanted to develop the green space over behind the fire department. So I can totally relate to what these people are saying. I agree with everything that gentleman just said. I know there was some questions on the finding of facts, and there's always a discussion about traffic, safety, visual enjoyment. So I guess the finding of facts for 6, 7, and 10, as Commissioner Bowie had mentioned, we have not been told what's going to be done as far as security, worried about the schools. People now already, as I mentioned last meeting, my daughters are in the middle school, they're riding the buses, and some people are having to sit on floors, and people, that's not being rectified. So people just want to be recognized and heard for the situations and wondering what the city's going to do to alleviate our fears or how we're going to compensate for developments like this. The concern is, I mean, I did a little more research, read the MOU. I think that's great that he's offering amenities. But like the proposal over behind the fire station, I think it's too many units, too many people in the area. I'm all for Raymore growing. I've only been here 8 months. I just hope that the council does really look at what the people are saying, because there's a whole bunch of people here.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Gary LaBelle. I'm at 1716 Bobcat Court. I'm in the basically adjacent to the water feature they have there. And my concern is really from a utility standpoint. Obviously, they already talked about safety, but I know they said, the developer said they're going to use the existing contours of the area, and having a frequent, close resident of the area, knowing that the stream behind there is already basically flooded, and basically looking at the existing contours, I'm seeing a lot of inflow into that stream that we have to now purchase a larger water feature, and also to the south off North Cass Parkway, because it seems like right now we don't have enough flow leaving the area. I know my neighbors frequently have flooding, even in just not even the smallest of storms. I think that's something we need to definitely take into account for, because the paths around there as well seem to flood, and taking my kids there, and I frequently run the area almost daily. I can't even use the path because it's usually flooded out, and then you have basically mud and everything around there that it's almost becomes unusable, and that's something we need to also take care of. I also like to point out they also used Honeywell and Cerner as a growth feature. I know that both those companies are now reached capacity, and they both have actually started looking at properties elsewhere across the city, and they now have to move folks around because the fire department have looked and they can't put any more people in those facilities. So that's something we need to take account for. My other concern is none of the homes around there look around nothing like what they showed. Those are obviously, you know, we have contemporary single-family homes where they're putting in something that doesn't even match what's already there existing. So that's, again, obviously that's an aesthetics, but we need to kind of take that into account. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Hensiker, 1002 Old Mill Road. I want to tag on to the first guy just in terms of addressing the house values. I think the city said that properties near Skyview and Manor Homes have been steadily increasing, but my question for the city is, what are comparable properties, not next to those rental units doing? Because if those properties are increasing 10%, but properties not next to those units are increasing 20 to 30%, then I would say that's a loss. I would say the developer's plans or his picture of 10% in a random smattering of houses does not in any way assuage the fears that people living next to these things, their homes are going to increase at the same rate as other homes. I've had 3 realtors in the last 2 weeks evaluate our house, which backs up to this structure, and all 3 of them have told us that their recommendation for us is to move. If this passes tonight, we should put our home on the market, and we need to move before these things are built. Because any realtor will tell you that trying to sell a single-family home that is next to multifamily housing is never going to sell at the same rate as a comparable home that is not next to multifamily housing. So for anyone to get up here and say that our home values are going to be fine is just not accurate, and I don't feel like we're being given the full story. I personally find it very concerning that this developer has only been in business 2.5 years. I've done some research online. I can't find any reviews, any ratings. There is no track record of history doing this type of a project. And while I certainly appreciate that you've been involved in single-family developments, that does not give you experience in this type of a development. There's nothing we can look to give us confidence that you are going to maintain the units. We can't look to something that you've done 10 years ago and say, wow, those look great, that you're not going to sell the complex and it's not going to be turned into low-income housing. There's no confidence there. I also feel like at the first meeting, we gave opinions about the look and feel of these units, and we were told that the developer would take that into consideration, and I feel like the look of the unit, they are not willing to budge on that. I don't believe that there's a lot of millennial and Gen X consumers flocking to Raymore to rent property. And so having these go up as a beacon of rental property, they look nothing like the surrounding community, nothing like the surrounding homes. We were driving through Raintree this weekend, and there are actually pretty nice multi-family duplexes that look exactly like the surrounding homes. You really have to stop and look to see that they are multi-family. They look great. I don't understand why we would put something like this right next to a high-end development, a high-end set of single-family homes, and think that it is not going to scream rental property. I'm concerned about the things that everyone else has mentioned in multiple meetings. I've mentioned the same things. I'm concerned about the schools. I realize that we just heard that Stonegate's fine accepting more students, but I'm concerned about test scores. I'm concerned about parent involvement, and having a husband who is a teacher, whether it's a popular opinion or not, when you bring a lot of rental property into a school district and into a school, it changes the dynamic of the school. And it may not be a PC thing to say, but I'm worried about test scores and I'm worried about parent involvement. I am worried about the flooding situation regardless of what you say. And my question to the developer is, knowing you are building units right down to a floodplain, how are you going to rent those units? Are you telling people that their renter's insurance is not covering them for flooding? Because we've been told in our houses that line this property that our homeowner's insurance doesn't cover flooding. If it is a FEMA designated floodplain, then you have to buy FEMA designated insurance. So are you providing that to your tenants? Knowing this property and knowing the situation, I would be terrified to live next to this bottom row, in this bottom row of townhomes. And just looking at the plot of land from what I look at it every day, it's out my back window, I don't understand how these things are going to be on top of each other. It's a straight slope down, they're going to be one on top of each other. Noise, parking, congestion, traffic, everything is concerning to me, and I hope that we are heard in this. I have not talked to one person in Raymore who is for this development. So I hope that you will hear us out. It's H-U-N-Z-I-K.
Please.
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
Yes, sir.
You might just remind the audience that they are giving testimony and that this is not an opportunity to ask questions because there is no opportunity for us or the developer to respond to them at this time. I did see the developer writing down the questions as she asked them, and they could certainly approach them, but this forum is for testimony only.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Keith Nutt. I live at 1517 Haystack, Stonegate subdivision. To follow up on what Mr. Holman just said, at the last meeting they were given a rebuttal time, and none of us weren't at that point in time. So I'm sure they'll be allowed to get back up here. There are 3 points I'd like to bring up. Number one, Mr. Gress talked about Eagle Glen. He talked about Creekmore. He talked about over by Skyview, that subdivision over there, that there was no problems with those homes values. The one point he left out is all of those homes were built after those townhomes were all put in. Here you're moving to a subdivision where just across the street you have people who have put their blood, sweat, and tears in just under $400,000 in brand new homes. And I don't think any of you would like to build a home with that kind of money and have a rental place put in right next door. In the last meeting of the Zoning Commission, we had one person on the committee state that those, in his opinion, were not luxury townhomes. They were the ugliest things he had ever seen. And everybody in this room agrees with that. That much I'll guarantee you. Everyone here is opposed. They mentioned Cerner and Honeywell. Everyone in this room tonight, they're looking for the millennial. There's not a millennial in this room. None of us are. None of you on the panel, none of you on the staff, nobody in the audience. It's a bedroom community. Bringing in that type of development is not going to bring in anything worthwhile to Raymore. The floods that are happening down there, they're talking about retention ponds. I'm not an engineer, but I have a somewhat idea of what a retention pond does. The water runs off, fills up the pond, and when it gets to a certain point, that water has to flow out. If the creek is flowing harder and faster, water is a strong element. What is coming out of those retention ponds is not going to leave. It's going to back up into the pond. Then your ponds are going to flood, which is going to release more water down into that zone. So we all stood here and did the Pledge of Allegiance. The last words in that are justice for all. We're looking for justice for all in the city of Raymore. We're not looking for justice for one man to come in and develop something that a whole town does not want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for everything that you do for our city. We do appreciate you. But I do have to start out with...
Name and address for the record,
Oh,
please.
I'm sorry. I'm Chris Palmer, 1719 South Fax Ridge Drive. I forgot that part. So that pond is right next to my house that I bought a year ago. And before my husband and I bought that, I called City Hall and I asked what is going to be built there because that road was just being cut through. And the city personnel told me in the development department that it was going to be 55 and over community single family homes. Great. Sounds perfect. And then this comes along. And before I start with what I wrote down, the petitions and what you stated, Mr. Holman, about the different ones and something didn't make sense, I will tell you that this community banded together. We met on our own time in our own places and we worked really, really hard. But your city members could not seem to tell us at the Good Neighbor meeting or when people came up to City Hall to find out what do we need to do, what does the paper need to look like and sound like, what needs to happen, and we did the very best in our heart of what we knew how to do from what we were told from the people here at City Hall. I want to say that living in a single family community next to Stonegate, we're part of the Good Ranch. that those are upper end homes. They're $250,000, $350,000, close to $400,000 homes, and I don't think that any one of you would want to live with that in your backyard. And as far as what the first person and the other lady said about the price of homes, I had a 2-story, 4-bedroom, 3-bath home in Eagle Glen, and when we sold it, I had to pay money to get out of that house. 5 years later, the house that I bought in Canner Ridge, which is a much lower end neighborhood than Eagle Glen, I made $70,000 in 5 years. So as far as his numbers of the percentages, I agree with what the other people said ahead of me, that that is not accurate for if you're next to multifamily and if you're not, because neither Canner Ridge or where I was in Eagle Glen were right next to the multifamily that close. There's not nearly enough buffer for the noise, for the sirens, and all the crime and whatnot that comes with multifamily homes like this. And the people that I've talked to that live in other areas of Raymore, and talking to the SRO officer at my school, most definitely there is higher need for fire, police, and ambulance in these multifamily homes. And right now, I have a really lovely, peaceful backyard that I love. And I just can't seem to, I guess there are no words. And at the last meeting with the zoning commission, they compared the multifamily homes that are behind Walmart with them being next to Timber Creek. And when I drove over there, because I knew what they were talking about, they have a huge wide road as a buffer. There's a huge amount of trees as a buffer on the east side of Dean, and it's significantly south, Timber Trails is, as compared to those multifamily homes behind Walmart. So they can't even compare that, because that's not even the same thing. Plus the fact that it's my understanding that across from Eagle Glen, where they're talking about the Hy-Vee, that they're putting in more rental property there, which is essentially down the street from us where we already have Eagle Glen, then if they're gonna add more, we certainly don't need more down at this end of Fox Ridge. But, as I try to stay positive, if you absolutely must approve this, and I beg you, and so do all of us, that you do not approve it, that it gets reorganized. And I took my own time after work, and I met with Mr. Gress, and I said, if this must go on, could they not have the road go through where the pond is? Could they move the amenities to where they're near the pond to create a bigger buffer for the 55 and over group, and kind of rearrange a little bit and maybe take some of them out, because next to the higher end single family homes, this is an excessive jump with that many people on that one corner. And I think that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next.
My name is Linda Benson, and I'm a licensed realtor, and I've been selling real estate in the Raymore area since 1975. I wrote, part of my job is to protect the values of homes that I have sold in Raymore by making sure the wrong type of zoning does not happen to affect the property value owners. I wrote a detailed letter to each of you, and hopefully you have read my thoughts on this project. I'd like to point out a few more facts. Over the years, I have seen things brought to the council, and in the beginning, the council thought they were pretty good ideas, but they ended up not being. Over the years, I've fought and led fights against rock quarries on the north and south end of Raymore, a 290-plus acre landfill on 195th Street between School Road and Peculiar Drive, a cement plant just west of where Walmart eventually located, an open-door drug center at J Highway and 58 Highway, a for-profit prison just west of Raymore in the vicinity of the Big Blue Water Tower just south of 58 on Peculiar Drive. And these are just a few of the things that have come to our councils over the years. I care about this community. The builders have given you percentages saying this type of housing does not affect the property values of existing homes. I am here to tell you it does, and that is from 44 years of experience. If you have two identical homes priced identical, one is surrounded by single-family homes and the other is next to multifamily homes, the buyer will always choose the one located around the single-family homes. So it affects the time that it takes to sell a home, and many times if the seller needs to sell that home, they will reduce the price in order to get the home sold. Fourplexes will affect the value and selling time of existing homes much more than a duplex that resembles a single-family home, as the lady talked about over in, where was it, Raintree. You're being told that these are luxury townhomes. Trust me, 1,350 square foot to 1,450 square foot square units are not luxury units. The word luxury is more associated with 2,000 square foot and above. I understand that in 1994 and 1995, the Good Ranch filed a plan with the city that showed the land before you tonight as multifamily. Over those previously mentioned 44 years, I have watched master plans being tweaked to not negatively affect those who came first. That is what I am asking of you. Think of those who came first. If you must have multifamily as you get down toward Hubach, and I know there's going to be commercial and probably light industrial out at 71 Highway, but do a step-down zoning. You should have duplexes up. If it's got to be multifamily, duplexes that you have some criteria on the design that's up by the single-family houses along Fox Ridge and the ones in Stonegate. People in Stonegate, they're going to, and along Fox Ridge, they're going to be looking out their back doors into the backs of fourplexes. And let me tell you, that's not a pretty sight. Yes, there's a buffer of trees and a stream and walking trails behind the homes in Stonegate and some of them on Fox Ridge. Trees only have leaves in the spring and summer. The people are going to be looking at those in the fall and the winter. And they're also going to be looking at a 47-car parking lot. The Meadowood homeowners will look out their windows to the middle or low-income housing, and families and visitors going to their homes down Dean Avenue, turning onto South Foxwoods Drive, will have the first impression of these fourplexes. I ask you do what is right for the people that came first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, please.
My name is Terry Clark, and I live at 109 Murphy in Raymore, Missouri. I've sold a couple members of the council properties in the 20 years that I've been in the business, and I concur with Linda Benson, who I bought my house from 35 years ago, that she's spot on in what she was saying. And I don't live in a $400,000 home, $500,000, and I don't even know if my house, well, I do know what my house is worth, but I will tell you that she's exactly right in the fact that when I take property owners to, prospective buyers to properties, the first thing they do, if they see a multifamily unit, they will cringe. Every single time, if they have the opportunity to go live by a single family unit or a multifamily unit, 99.9% of the time they are. And the property values, while they are increasing in the community overall, and while it is 10% in the Eagle Glen subdivision, I have personally shown lots along that back corridor in Eagle Glen that are the last to sell, and I think there's lots still available there if I'm not mistaken. When I first moved to Raymore 35 years ago, there was tons of opposition to the Skyview Estates or the Skyview duplexes and townhouses that were there. The community was promised that they would be luxury duplex townhouses, that they would be owner occupied. They weren't. And then when they were rented, it was hard to get renters in there. And I'm an equal opportunity homeowner. I sell to any and everyone. I live in a humble home that I've lived in for 35 years. But I will tell you that as a result of the townhouses that were put in along that corridor, they didn't rent, and they eventually went to Section 8 that made a huge impact on the school district, along with the keeping those things occupied. The crime rate went up. Statistics prove that the crime rate went up in Raymore as a result of Skyview. Now, when I talked to the city planner, I believe it was you that I talked to, sir, you informed me that you had talked to the school district about them being on board. I've talked to multiple members of the school district who said they don't have an opinion as of yet, and they do not. So I don't know who told you that they were on board, but that is not the truth. Second of all, I am aware that you're for this proposal, yet you informed me in a room full that you rent. You don't live in Raymore. So you proposing something that's going to affect the homeowners of this community is huge to me. So with that, and I will agree with the attorney when he spoke about millennials. In the 20 years that I've been in this business, I have sold probably, I would say in the 20 years I've been in the business, in 17 years, I never sold one townhouse, nor a duplex. In the past 3 years, I've sold 12. Why is that? Because number one, we have the baby boomers. I'm one of them. There are a ton of single people who are either divorced, widowed, that are looking for places to live. That's why or people that are moving down and don't want to go to, say, Foxwood Springs or Carnegie Village. They're not ready. These people are wanting to buy something that they don't have to maintain as rigorously as they would, or they're wanting to downsize, excuse me. So millennials now, what they're wanting is they don't want to do maintenance. They want to live in a multicultural area, but they like to purchase, and they have the money to purchase. We're looking at Cerner. Income at Cerner is $50,000, $60,000, all the way up to $150,000. Same thing for Honeywell. In my experience, if people can't afford to buy at interest rates being the lowest they've ever been in the industry, typically credit is an issue. It's the number one reason why people don't purchase. What I would like to see proposed, not because I'm a property adjoining owner, not because I live in a $400,000 house, and not because my kids are going to be affected by the school district. I had one child that went to Rockhurst, one that went to Ray-Pac. They both got scholarships, and they both have great educations. What I would like to see the city look at before approving this is an opportunity for townhouses to be built for those millennials and the baby boomers who are divorced, who are downsizing, the single mothers who can't afford to, who aren't able to get into 55 and older homes. Before I was 55, I couldn't get into Meadowood or to, any of the adjoining properties. I would love to see you consider, and yes, I make my money by selling these properties. However, I also moved to Raymore when the population was 2,000 and it's now 20,000. I would love to see you consider doing just what the trend is right now is for single-family homes in townhouses, duplexes, and so forth as a buffer between, as you said, a wonderful plan in the 1990s as a buffer between the commercial and the residential single-family homes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Kim Hanner. I live at 920 Old Mill Road. 920.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I live at 920 Old Mill Road. Kim Hanner. I believe that based on last week's meetings and obviously things I've read on social media and heard from my neighbors and heard from others in the community, that this is probably a done deal. I'm hoping, though, that you all take an opportunity to listen to the residents that have spoken to you this evening and last week and at other meetings and have met with you privately or individually outside of this forum, and take into consideration what's being said to you. I believe that there is demand in Raymore for rental property. I think that there are a lot of people who would like to rent for various reasons. But I also believe that this city has not done their due diligence on what is needed to accommodate a rental property of this nature in this location. Last week, it was shared that we purposely built a walking trail in a planned flood zone that goes right behind my house. I'm sorry. So with that being said, I think that you mentioned, or someone up here mentioned, that they've seen some videos or pictures today or recently of the rains that we've had and what it's done to that walking trail. Every single time that creek floods, which is about every time somebody spits in it, because that's how bad it is, that trail gets flooded, it gets covered with debris, it gets covered with mud and muck and whatever else. Somebody has to call the city and say, hey, look, this walking trail that you built is again covered with stuff. Can you come clean that up? That consumes city resources every single time. It is not cheap. We planned that. We did that on purpose. We now have created a continuous problem for our city resources. I don't believe this gentleman down here when he says that this is a planned flood zone. Some of it was a planned flood zone. When I built my house, and I said this last week and I'm going to repeat it again today because I've since then spoke with FEMA. When I built my house, my lot had 2 surveys. The first one said it was a flood zone, and the second one said it was not. They were done approximately 5 years apart. I paid to have another survey done because I was concerned that we had conflicting surveys on file with the city. The third survey said no flood zone for my lot. Since then, 4 years ago, we got a letter from FEMA. My lot is now a flood zone. Me and 3 other neighbors along our street. We now have to pay insurance through FEMA for flood. When I talked with FEMA then, and when I talked with FEMA this week, or this past week, I asked them, how did this happen? I had a survey. What has changed that now has caused you to tell me that my lot is now a flood zone? Your city has failed to properly plan and manage that creek. That's what FEMA told me. Okay, who wants to buy my house? Please raise your hands. I live in a flood zone. I didn't when I built my house in 2004, and I live in one now. I'll be lucky if I can sell my house for what I bought it for. I can't finish my basement for fear that my house will flood. I have to pay extra money to pay for insurance for a home that wasn't in a flood zone to begin with. I've asked last week about the growth that our schools have experienced, and I believe that the city planner has said that the school district has expressed no concerns. I have concerns. I don't know that the school district has expressed no concerns, but that's what he said. In the last 4 years, we've added 189 students to our district. Not a whole lot. However, we added 527 elementary kids to our district. Based on this gentleman's plans, we are targeting millennials. We are targeting younger people to come to our community. Those younger people will have younger children. Those younger children will be coming to our schools. What is the plan from the district that this city has taken into consideration, that you all have taken into consideration when deciding that this is an appropriate plan for our town at this time? Again, I'm not opposed to rental property. I believe that the city needs it, but I don't believe that the due diligence has been done to agree to this right now. We're asking questions, and I know you all can't respond to us right now, but nobody's responding to us in social media. Nobody's sending us a letter. Nobody's saying, hey, this is what's happening. Last week it was shared. There's a lot of stuff going on that I don't know about. Why don't we know these things? Where's the transparency? Why are you not telling us? Why are we standing here until 10 and 11 o'clock at night, multiple evenings, asking these same questions over and over and over? Nobody's answering them. I'm not opposed, but I'm very concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Lyle Gibson. I live at 1525 Wildwood Circle. I would just ask the city council and the mayor to please listen to the voice of the people. As I said in the first meeting, this is about capitalism versus the will of the people. Capitalism does have its place in our markets, but we have to listen to the voice of the people. Now, the meetings that I've attended, I've heard different modifications every single time, and I was taking notes. Even tonight, I heard some different things. It's as though the developers are building the plane while flying it. 2 years of service in this industry, that's not going to cut it. You have people in this community that love this community, appreciate what Raymore has to offer because we are unique. We are a bedroom community. I still consider Raymore country. Even though I grew up in KCK, I used to love going to the country. This is what I see when, I reflect on my childhood. This is a bedroom community, but please, City Council, listen to the will of the people. The people are the ones that elected all of you. You have an obligation to listen to the will of the people over capitalism. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Kelly Gebauer, 1006 Old Mill Road. Gebauer. So I've been up at every meeting, so I figured I might as well stand up and share with you. Some of you I've not seen, some of you I've contacted. I also have some concerns for the fourplexes that Griffin Riley is proposing. There's not much that I can say that has not already been said by the citizens of Raymore over and over again. Yes, this is in my backyard, as I've learned a new acronym in social media, NIMBY. However, the reasons I am extremely concerned with this project is not because I do not want poor people living behind me. One, I grew up poor and money has nothing to do with my view. Two, $1,450 a month rent starting is in no way a poor man's rental price. My major concerns are regarding our schools, water flooding behind our property into our established subdivision, our density in one small area, our traffic, and the look and feel of our hometown. Schools, I have 3 kids in the Ray-Pec School District that have gone since kindergarten. One just graduated, one is a junior at the high school, and one is a 5th grader at Stonegate Elementary. Where will all of these kids go that live in that fourplex complex? Will they go to our school? They have to go somewhere in Raymore. We've had record enrollment the last 4 years in a row in our school district. The last number I saw was 6,408 students enrolled at Ray-Pec, not to mention the fact we are busing kids into our school district from Belton. I have a friend who lives in the apartments behind Hy-Vee. She pays $860 a month for a 3-bedroom she can barely afford. Her 3 boys attend Stonegate Elementary and are bused here for an hour each direction every morning. And they are in an area so bad she cannot even let her kids go outside and play. These are all her words as a description of where she lives. What makes these complexes a better choice for the people, for good families compared to all the other rental options in Raymore? I'm referring to the existing ones that have apartment availability, as well as the new ones going up behind Culver's and behind Sonic, etc. These are already in existence, however, new ones are being added. I've spoken with several teachers who are extremely concerned about this project. Many did not feel comfortable signing the petition for fear their positions at the school. My 5th grader has 25 kids in his class. My 11th grader shuffles between the halls because there are so many kids between classes, that is as fast as she can go. If we are all creating these complexes, where will those children go to school? How will we continue to bus other kids into our already overcrowded school district? What and when is the plan going to take effect for the accommodations for the new kids bringing additional enrollment? Water flooding. When our house was purchased on Old Mill, along with many others, we were not in a floodplain. We have since, in recent years, been notified by the city that this is a floodplain. This was not a floodplain before the bridge was built. This is a lot of runoff, all the way from Foxwood. The more buildings we add to the 25-acre lot, the more of a problem we will have. Currently, the farm ground and tree line does help with the flooding problem. When they add 51 buildings, 2 or 3 parking lots, where will all of that runoff go? How will the city accommodate the homes of the established residents along with the city trail? Why would the city put a walking trail in a flood zone? The trail is consistently underwater at the slightest rain, and states like that for days make it unusable by our citizens. The new construction north of Cass Parkway has created even more flooding problems along with the streets as well. Mud is everywhere. However, the new rainstorm we had today, which some of you got pictures, they're going to bring more water and more flooding. Can renters get flood insurance? What happens if these buildings end up in flooding and then go vacant or unusable? What happens if the runoff problem washes out several established homes along the area? Density and traffic. 204 rental units in such a small area screams for issues, crime, and concern. Why would Raymore want any rental buildings in such a small space? The streets will not be wide enough, as discussed in the last meeting, for emergency vehicles to get through. The developer said they would try to accommodate more parking if possible. However, they already told the city that they have another parking lot built in for off-street parking. And that was like trying to pull IT just to get the developer to offer to try for the second parking lot at the meeting, which I do not see in the picture. The mayor mentioned that not all 800 cars would be on 58 at the same time. However, how many cars can 58 handle? I do not see as much concern with additional cars traveling on Dean, where the proposed apartment complex will be. I see the issues on the standstill in rush hour on 49 Highway, or 58 being already consistently backed up, not to mention all the additional student drivers heading to Ray Peck High School. The density itself in such a small area appears to not fit in the surrounding areas. It was mentioned that if we increase our population density in this area, more businesses would be coming to Raymore. I would like to know which businesses are considering to coming to Raymore if we fill another 204 rental units. The color was brought up by something about the developer could consider changing. The design, he said, was non-negotiable. These do not fit in the surrounding areas or the neighborhoods. They will stick out like a sore thumb. The developer claims that it is to attract millennials and older retired wanting to downsize. I have talked to hundreds of older folks, and not one of them wants to build or wants to rent in a fourplex. This is not a good look for the face of Raymore. Mr. Good has hundreds of acres he could sell to this developer, so why this specific plot of land? This plot of land will be the face of Raymore right off of 49 Highway. If there is any way the developer and the city could come to a mutual agreement to at least make the units look more like the surrounding subdivisions, make this a more cohesive transition. I personally do not mind growth and the development in Raymore. I would just like to see it fit in our hometown. The specific development does not look, feel, or sound like it is what Raymore citizens want. I know everyone thinks it's just the people in the surrounding areas and neighborhoods that do not want this project in their backyard, but I assure you, many people all over Raymore are talking about this and the fact that they do not want this project approved. Please consider the words of the Raymore citizens and vote down this project. If the council still considers the project, could there be a postponement to see if the developer could actually accommodate some of these concerns that the city and the residents have? It is easy for a developer to stand up and say they will try to make those accommodations, but who is holding them responsible for the completion and approval of those requests? We do not want these rentals. We do not want to be like Kansas City. The city was comparing us to Kansas City in the National earlier, but that's why people moved to Raymore. Thank you.
Thank you. We've all been up here taking a lot of notes on the issues that you brought forward to us. I would ask, please, if you have anything additional to what has been said already, please say so. Try to keep your comments 5 minutes or less.
Possible. Craig Shoemaker, 702 South Fox Ridge Drive. First issue is that everybody's been talking about this 1994 plan, and they've been talking about attached single family. The part that they've never brought up at all is that on that plan it says R2. Does not say R3, does not say anything else. That plan that Mr. Good approved and that the council approved says R2, and it says that for everything from Hubach Hill up to Lucy Webb. Two of those units, those areas, the Meadows and the Meadowwood, were switched to R1. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of a concern about putting R1 directly across the street from commercial. At least whoever it was that passed those, approved those zoning changes, seemed to have thought that was a perfectly fine thing to do. So the concern about needing a buffer on this corner doesn't really hold a lot of water, since that original plan was not maintained, which is, like I say, it was originally R2 clear from Lucy Webb all the way down Dean. The area for higher density was south of Dean, or south on Dean, but south of Hubach Hill, south of North Cass Parkway. That's on the plan that way. It's shown that way. It's been shown that way since 1994. You don't have a street to get down there right now, but you could build the street. The other issue, so that issue basically is that was zoned or planned to be R2. And I even have the description of R2 here if you'd like to hear it. Everybody knows it's duplexes. That's basically what it is, single family and duplexes. Doesn't say anything about triplexes, doesn't say anything about fourplexes. The other issue is crime. Most of the people here, a lot of people here who are on Nextdoor know I've been tracking stealing, petty theft in Raymore for about a year and 2 months. Every week I post a little report on Nextdoor talking about the commercial stealing, the number of incidents. This is drawn from the police blotter here in Raymore, and the residential stealing. Last year, up into the months of June, July, and August, we were averaging somewhere around 15, 16 incidences of stealing a week in Raymore. It would vary back and forth between more residential and more commercial. Walmart, that corner up there, was probably the hottest area. But 16%, roughly 1/6 of all the stealing in Raymore happened on Skyview and on Sunrise. Those are where the police calls went to deal with stealing. This is just stealing and burglary. Burglaries are extremely rare in Raymore, so they don't really count. But stealing, things like people having stuff stolen out of their open garages, people having their cars not broken into, because nobody really, hardly any cases of actually breaking into a car, but opening an unlocked car. People leaving their cars unlocked. Somebody comes along in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, opens the door, takes credit cards, cameras, all kinds of stuff, anything valuable they can find, loose cash laying around. Interestingly, they talk about the number of rentals in Kansas City. You know what the crime situation is in Kansas City. We all know about that. So they've got 63% home ownership, the rest of its rentals. They've got a crime wave going in Kansas City, where in Raymore, even with the numbers that we've had, the reason I started tracking this was because there was a lot of discussion on social media about this. And I said, well, we need to actually find out what's really going on. Well, since the first of the year, it's dropped about 25 to 30% from what it was last year. So the crime rate in Raymore in general is getting better. But last year, during the summer, the crime rate was highest in those rental areas, especially, like I say, Skyview and on Sunrise. That's just the numbers. You're talking about statistics and the real facts. That's actually what's been happening. The other thing I'd like to comment on here briefly is the buffer area. I want people to think about the fact that you see the pond up there, those buildings to the right, those 3 buildings there, those are roughly 30 feet higher than the pond. The top of that roof is 30 feet higher. Because what you don't see on there is there's an 8-foot to 10-foot slope from the front of the building to the back of the building. So that basement is going to be above the pond. You could take that up to the main floor, and then you have the main floor, then you have the second floor. So creating a visual barrier for the people who live across the street over there in Meadowwood is going to be pretty difficult when you're going. I don't know what the height of the pond is above the road, but you've got maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 feet. And then you've got a 3-story building on top of that. So you're talking upwards of 40 feet above Foxbridge Drive, just for those 3 buildings. And then you've got all the buildings along along Cedar Crest. There are new buildings there. And those, obviously there's no way you can shield all of those unless you do something like take out that end building, do something really serious there, and then also on the north side, or on the east side of Cedar Crest, between Cedar Crest and the pond, if you're going to shield them from those buildings, you really have to do some major plantings, some major landscaping. One other quick item just before I finish here is there's lots of little nitpicks in this plan that you could go through. But the 16 buildings along Dean and that turn around the corner and go down Hubach, you notice that their driveways are on the back side, on the east side of the buildings. Their front doors are on the Dean side. People in, especially rental units, maybe that's prejudiced, they're going to have barbecue grills, play areas for their kids. You see the units with all the slides and stuff and swing sets. Where are those going to go? Are those going to go by their people's front door? Will that be allowed within it with their HOA restrictions? Are they going to put them beside the buildings? That's all going, whatever they do along there, if they're allowed to do that, is going to be all visible from Dean. It goes back to the argument earlier about what kind of an impression do we want for people who come into our community, who've only been in our community for 20 seconds because they just came off the highway, they turned up Dean, they're going to see a whole string of fourplexes and with all of the play structures and all that stuff out on their front lawn because they got no place else to put it. One other problem with the plan is that currently the parking, there's, I think it's 17 or 18 buildings.
Hey, Mayor, can you?
Yes, I'm this one comment.
That'd be great.
There's 17 or 18 buildings that are more than 200 feet from the off-street parking. I don't know how far you want to go for your guests to go to your house, but a third of those buildings are more than 200 feet from their street parking. So there are details like that that really have not been considered properly in the design of this. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Leslie Embry, and I live at 417 South Pelham Path. I recently moved here to Raymore, and I was instantly delighted. I've lived all over the place, and moving to Raymore was a breath of fresh air. And it was such a nice escape from this type of product as it's been described by Mr. Lovelace and his team. I called my best friend when I first moved here, and I told her how beautiful Raymore is growing up. I, the other day, visited the Raymore Activity Center for the first time, and it was amazing. Just the buildings and the structure, the way that the integrity of the structures are also really, really nice. It gives me almost a Leawood Overland Park feel, and that was kind of a surprise. Additionally, the quiet spaces are a really nice touch, again, to get away from this type of housing that I've lived in over the past many, many years. I actually moved from Lionsgate in Overland Park, $1,000 in a one-bedroom apartment. And even that type of space has so many issues. The amenities that you speak of are kind of almost to me like a gimmick. If you look at the dog park space with this many homes and this many people, and if you allow people to have dogs in these type of homes, you're going to be averaging 1 to 2, sometimes three dogs per space. From my experience, these dog parks end up being a no cleanup space, postage stamp size slab of dead grass. No one wants to go there. Aside from all the other issues, the flooding, the parking, the school overcrowding, I won't go into that. I was previously a teacher, and if they say that the classrooms are at 75% capacity, go be a teacher in that classroom for one day. It's pretty rough even at 75%. Lastly, I work in one of the corporate buildings down here south of Kansas City. I'm around millennials all day, every day. Their number one complaint is how far away we are from downtown KC. I know people moving north of Kansas City just to be closer to the city. They're willing to drive 40 minutes just to be closer to the city. And yes, that was a surprise to me too, seeing that the target here is millennials. I'll agree with someone else. there's not millennials in the room. I'm probably one of the youngest people here, and I'm almost 40 years old. So with that being said, please don't allow one project to change the dynamics of this beautiful hometown.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Charles Roberts, 934 Elder Court. I live in the Stonegate subdivision. I just want to point out a couple of things that were expressed. It was stated that millennials are searching for these type of apartments. During our 9 years of living in Stonegate, which we was choosing between Raymore and Lee Summit, and we chose Raymore. We love the town. We just love everything about it. We both shared laughs and tears with our neighbors, and we've seen neighbors come and go. But what we're noticing in our subdivision, as the people like me getting old move out, or I don't know what's over millennial, but the older group of millennials leave out, younger millennials are moving in. Our neighbor, for example, they just moved into theirs, just had a new baby girl. So I just wanted to point out that millennials are also looking for homes. And if it does not affect the selling of new homes, the subdivision that's just north of it, and I think it's called Prairie View, I'm not sure. Okay, Meadowwoods, whatever. All of a sudden, they're only building one house now, where they were just selling them prior to that sign coming up saying zoning change. Now, when the zoning change came, 2 or 3 houses, I believe, are still on the market. They're not selling. They sold, when they had the parade of homes, I think they sold like 4 homes just like that. And the other thing I just wanted to confirm with people, I had the opportunity to work with FEMA on claims. My job allows me to do that. And they are true. What people are saying is true. If you live in a floodplain, FEMA's not going to cover you. You have to have FEMA insurance. And those back apartments, if those people are living there and it's in a floodplain, they're just going to be out of luck when they call FEMA. I've seen that happen too many times. I saw it in Harvey. I saw it up in New York and Sandy. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Again, I would reiterate, we've heard a lot of the same testimony here tonight.
My name is Sandy Files. I live at 1821 Prairie Grass in Meadowwood. And I guess my question, I know you're not answering questions, but we've heard 1994 for how long and how many people have said it and read it and all that. In 1994, when this land was set up supposedly to put in multiple family units, did it say anything about rentals? I think rental is the key word.
Thank you.
My name is Martha Hurst. I live at 708 Blue Stem Court in Meadowwoods of the Good Ranch. Mayor Termeau, you were the police chief when I lived at 604 Cantor Street, and now you're my mayor. I elected you for that seat. I was disappointed as a registered voter, and the remarks that you made that you wanted to see a development that had amenities brought to this town. I have driven around Raymore. There's a lot of townhomes. There's a lot of duplexes. There are individual homes, one being 604 Cantor, that is now a rental in Cantor Ridge subdivision. I just want you to be aware of that. I'm very disappointed that you're not listening to the needs and what this property was laid out for and the goods, and it's all corporate greed. That's all I want to say. Good luck on re-election.
Anyone else?
Name's Greg Olson, 1811 Prairie Grass Drive. I'm going to ask you a question. I don't expect you to answer or anything, but has anybody heard the old phrase, you know, history repeats itself? Now, I know you can't answer, but if you don't believe in it, take a trip to Grandview. Look at the conditions of Grandview. Look at that mess that is in. I lived there for 54 years before I moved out here. And now I see Raymore is starting to repeat this. And this fine gentleman over here in the staff, he can spit those numbers out and those facts and figures out that mean absolutely nothing. Why do we care what the percentage of rental property is in the nation, in the city, in Kansas City? It doesn't mean anything. This was a bed and breakfast community. That's what the people moved here come here for. They didn't come here for rental property. They didn't come here to be millennials and move on to the next thing. And stop and think about rental property. Isn't that temporary housing? So what you're doing is you're creating temporary homes for temporary people that are not buying into the city. As with a single-family home, you got people that are making a commitment here to live here, you know, to stay for however long it takes to bring their equity, their home up. They can sell it, make some money, and move to the next one, maybe. As far as I lived in Grandview for 29 years in the same slum and was happy. But Grandview got bad enough that I decided maybe we better move on to something a little bit better. And 25 years ago, when this was platted, our society as a nation was entirely different than what it is now. That property abuts Meadowwoods Phase 3, and there's, 7 houses built in there? And there's not real good hopes of building any more in there since this plan has come up. I've talked to the developers and stuff that's worked in there that do the building and stuff, and it doesn't look good. They're having a little trouble selling those houses because of this addition right here. And it said, it's just, it boggles my mind how you can have so many people show up and be against something and have so much positive talk from our city staff and thing about how great this is, when it's not really a great thing for the community. And Raymore has done some really nice things. Oh my God, look at the parks, how they've done, and we got the lake up here and the amphitheater and all that stuff. They've made some real great improvements for a community that people buy into. Rentals don't buy into it. I worked at Honeywell, and Honeywell's a great thing because I watched the millennials. Honeywell, the corporation, actually actively goes out and recruits engineers. They go down to Rolla and places like that, all these engineering colleges, and they bring these young kids up, and they put them down there. The first thing they got to do is get a clearance, anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And over half these kids, by the time they get their clearance, where they can actually work on something inside that building, pick up and move. They have work experience now. They worked at 2 years at Honeywell, and they move on to bigger and higher pay. They're not looking for a commitment to make and deal. And the ones that do stay, the younger ones that are there with a family, or they're making a commitment, to raise a family and be there, they're not looking for rental property. They're looking for single-family homes. And I said, some of the young ones are really smart and realize that if they buy a piece of property, they can sell it later on. But they don't buy in a neighborhood where they're going to have a bunch of rental property and stuff. They buy it as single-family homes, and they actually buy houses. Then they'll rent them out to their buddies and stuff and do this. So, let's be fair. Let's keep Raymore a small community. It can become as big as you want it, but you need to keep the framework back down to the, the bed and breakfast type. We can bring business in. You're doing great with the park services. I complimented Public Works over there. I think they do a fine job. I think they could use some newer equipment too, but they, anyway, I think everything works pretty good as far as the community goes. But this is just history repeating itself. It looks just like Grandview again. You go to Greenfield Village, townhomes. The neighbor grew across the street, got married. Her and her husband bought a deal in Greenfield Village. They can't get rid of it. They can't get out of it. They can't get rid of it. They can't do anything. Rape, murder, arson, everything goes on inside that. The police spend more time in that one little area than they do in the whole community. And I said, this may not be like that, but the potential is always there. The city cannot control the landlord. If this developer builds it and decides to sell it, oh, looky, the profit margin went up. We can dump this thing and let somebody else have it. And now we got a landlord that doesn't care. And you should see that, because right up there where Dairy Queen is, that whole area in there is depressed in there because you got a landlord that's out of town and won't even fix the parking lot. In fact, I understand an 80-year-old woman fell in the parking lot trying to go to the beauty shop in there.
Anything with regard to this project, sir? You've been up there for 5 minutes. Anything?
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I either ask for a 5-minute recess or I need to leave the dais. We've been here a long time. I need to visit the facilities.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess and re-adjourn at 9:30.
Thank you.
Order. And where we left off, we were in the middle of the public comment section of our public hearing. Again, I would reiterate to those who've not yet testified, if you would like to testify tonight, please do so, but try to keep a comment to anything other than what's already been talked about, okay? So please step forward. State your name and address for the record. Try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My name is Brian Sarsfield. I'm at the Stonegate Community, 908 Old Mill Road. Again, going with the theme of going with new information. I'm a dual-degreed engineer. I used to work over at Honeywell. My wife still works there. I am a Gen Xer. She is also born in the 70s. As far as renting a quadplex or something like that for our jobs for Honeywell or for Cerner, that would probably not be something we would want to do. In fact, we moved to Raymore because it was a single-family, detached, very quiet bedroom community. We purchased our home. We want our family to grow up in a very nice, quiet neighborhood with our kids, run around the block, and having space in the schools. That's why we came to this community. We think that's a very good model, and I think that you should probably go forward. So I'm on the record of saying I'm against what's being proposed tonight for this particular development. Also, just another, I guess, perspective as well. The numbers for Honeywell is 4,500 people working at that location. Believe it or not, there's actually 2 other large plants to the west into Kansas. They're not all here. They're concentrated here. They're actually into Kansas as well. And a lot of those other people work from home, or they actually work off-site at other bases that's actually out of state. So you have to look at those numbers as well. I guess to close on the argument as well with just new information, I guess, like I said, one of the reasons we came here is because it was quiet. We like it that way. 81% of the people own their own homes here. They take pride in it. Keep it up. It's not people very transient lifestyle. When I was there, a lot of the millennials actually would brag that, hey, they moved downtown. They like to be in Westport. You can get up, go down the block, have a drink, get sushi, and get mugged 2 blocks over if you'd like. So with that said, I guess in my 40 years, I've become a curmudgeon. I'm a get off my lawn. I like the quiet stuff, kind of whatever. I'll close with this, I guess, just as a reminder that I'm reminded when they used to teach history back in school still, as our first president once said that government at every level it's not reason, it's force. And like fire, it is a very dangerous servant and it's a deadly master. And I think that if we don't listen to the very logical, very good arguments that these citizens are presenting here tonight, we're going to be proving our first president true. So I just ask you again to consider these good, wonderful, logical arguments. I hope we provided some good information you didn't hear. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else?
Hello. My name is Sherry Adams. I live at 1717 Bobcat Court. My backyard butts up to Fox Ridge that was just put through. We're the house that has the nice pool. And by looking back there, with the trees removed, with all of these other things, I'm going to be in my yard looking up at these apartments or duplexes, fourplexes, whatever they are. I think putting the road through was bad enough, and now to know that I'm going to have that to look at is very concerning to me. All the other reasons everybody said, safety, all of these other things. I also have a son who is a millennial. He's 26, just turned. And he has lived downtown and loved it. He left Raymore to go downtown where the action is. There's no action in Raymore for those young kids. They don't want to live here. He has since moved back, is saving money because he didn't want his money going, writing this check, where does it go? Nowhere. He is saving money so he can buy a house. And he would probably buy a house in Raymore. But I just want you to know, millennials don't really want to necessarily rent in Raymore, just saying. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that because of where I'm at, it's really going to affect me. They said they delivered letters. My house is within that 185 feet. I got nothing. I was out of town on vacation, came back, and all of this stuff happened on Friday. I had to leave work early so I could come sign the petition, get it notarized, and all of these things. So I would have been at the meetings before if I'd have known this was going on. So anyway, definitely opposed. I hope you guys listen to us. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, Mr. Mayor, my name is Al Benz. I'm at 1930 Meadowlark Drive. I live in the Meadows. I've been out here 10 years, and I remember driving down 49 Highway, and it said, the Good Ranch. a good place to be. And so we drove to the Good Ranch, and we found a good place to be. We are in the first phase of the Meadows. We have 80 homes in there, and I'd like to make a correction. We are not a seniors community. We are not registered as a 55-plus community, though most of us that live there are. We have a wonderful walking trail, and one of the things that really drew us out here was the bedroom community. I came from Raytown. I had 20 years in real estate experience. I agree with the other real estate agents that have come before you, and when you're comparing prices from a single-family home, if it's sitting next to a fourplex or a rental unit in a single-family addition, it's going to sell for less. There's just no doubt about it. But I just want to talk about a couple of points that were brought up that haven't been mentioned, and that's kind of the history here of Raymore, because we've talked about timber trails, and we've talked about the Ridgewood Villas. The timber trails are the ones right behind the Walmart. I just drove through the other night at 6 o'clock. They have 64 units in there. They're all single-car garages. So you can put 2 cars in each driveway. And at 6 o'clock at night, you can barely get down the road. It is a block and a half long. In the street, there are portable basketball courts because there's no place for the kids to play. So they're playing in the street. That is high-density housing. Behind Culver's, which is Ridgewood Villas, they have 89 units in there. They go from 8 units to 5 units to 8 units back to 6 units. Those are, again, all single-car garages, allowing 2 cars in each drive. And driving through there at 6 o'clock is the same thing. There's no room. The cars are parked on the street. There's hardly room to get through. We're talking about high-density housing here, and this is the single largest high-density housing unit that will ever come to Raymore. I'm opposed to it in every manner from what the people have set up here. We don't need this in Raymore. And I would like to remind everybody just to drive down Skyview Drive from 58 to Lucy Webb. Those are all fourplexes. Those all started out to be luxury units that have now turned into probably the worst kept area of Raymore. We don't need this. Listen to the people of Raymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time?
Good evening. Ryan Supple, 1525 Horseshoe Drive. I was asked maybe if the city, could you put up that floodplain map for being on the board of the pool at the Stonegate subdivision. Sorry, I'm not sure. Are you guys going to be able to see this or no? On here,
we know
there's
what
no.
you're talking about.
I'm sorry. Any chance?
I don't know that is it in our packet? It's not, okay.
Give me 1 second, I'll broadcast it to your screen during this comment.
It's just a small detail, it's just to help with visual. The pool is actually not identified in the flood area of the Stonegate water detention area that we were discussing earlier. The July 4th, July 5th, the evening we had torrential rains here in Raymore. Being on the board of the pool there in Stonegate, I got a call at 6 o'clock in the morning that we couldn't find the pool. It actually had been covered by water. We actually had a water line 6 inches up on the pump house and the bathrooms of that facility down there. So I'm wondering to the developer and their engineer and our city works the people, if that's not in the flood zone as it looks on this map, what is? What else isn't? I can tell you, to not be able to find a pool that's as big as that pool is on the morning after the 4th of July was quite shocking. That's how flooded that area had been. So if that's not accommodated for, if that's not accounted for, I apologize. What else isn't? So that's one of my first points. The second thing, there's another fourplex division here in Raymore, most people are familiar with. I won't get into specifics. Has 246 units, most of them fourplexes, some of them duplexes. That facility is built out on 56 acres. Rough math on that's 0.21 acres per unit. Doing the math on these 204 units, they're getting down to about 0.12 acres per unit on the 25-acre proposed development. So my question is, if you've seen, maybe you know the fourplex I'm talking about, that's how tight of a density that we're talking about, is cramming 204 units on nearly half of the acreage that we have another fourplex unit in the community that's already been developed for several decades. So just a couple of points and statistics that I've worked on. The additional thing I'll bring up is I work with a stormwater detention pond. I also was driving up 58 today when the downpours were happening, yesterday when the downpours are happening, and the immediate response by the police department to block off the areas that are flash flooded there on a routine basis. And most of that is due to an old detention pond that was from 40 years ago that overflows the stormwater system that we have currently. So it's not that we're just, we're not building this out this year or 10 years. It's 20 and 30, 40 years on those detention ponds that we have to be concerned with. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Evening, Mr. Mayor. Jeffrey Boyce, 2011, Prairie Grass Drive, Meadowwood subdivision. Past president HOA, current vice president HOA there. I only have 2 points I want to bring up. I know you don't want rhetoric, so I'm not going to give you any rhetoric. But their drawing here shows one retention pond. It shows a pond that's currently existing, currently full, never drains. Shows no other drawings, no other retention ponds, no other things. So we have no way of knowing they're going to help stop the upstream flooding. And then we have Prairie View, which is being built out already on the good land on the south side of Hubach Hill with the retention pond. That retention pond is going to dump into the creek, stopping the downflow of water, increasing the flow up there at Dean Road already, where Dean Road now is having to be blocked off by the police department every time we get a heavy rain because people stall out in the middle of the water. Secondly, the comparison on the loss of property or the increase of the value of the 10% over the years, been compared against duplex housing, a couple of fourplexes, nothing with this density. I asked him when they came out and did the public hearing the first night round, did he consider coming in with less units so it'd be more appealing to the public? He said, no, couldn't figure that out. If you could, we'd give you a job. I'm sorry, he didn't do his homework. He knows that he could have come in with a lower amount and still made a major profit off of this deal, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I'll move on to just one more. Okay.
My name is Suzanne McLean. I did not come here meaning to speak this evening, but the things I've heard out in the hallway, the things I've heard in this room, I'm appalled. 829 Trailway Drive, and I live in Stonegate. And we have lived here for 13 years, and it's a wonderful community. We have loved living here. This is something that we've looked forward to. We're kind of getting in our older years, and we do enjoy living here. And we don't want this. We don't need it. And the city of Raymore does not want it. It's not just me. We got to think about the people that live here. That's the people it's going to affect. If you don't live here, it doesn't affect you, but it affects each and every one of us. And I want you to go home and think about that, because it really bothers me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Kay Hudson, 1923 Prairie Grass Drive. I moved to Raymore a year ago because where I previously lived, my house was broken into. They never found out who did it. People would come by and open my mailbox. I never knew if they'd taken my mail or not. Go down the street, and there's a lot of mailbox that were opened. There were a lot of rental units where I came from. The police department, they did a good job, but you can't control everybody. And I ask you, why do you live in Raymore? And what do you hold for the future of Raymore? Raymore has always been on a pedestal to me. I moved to this area in 1964, and I looked to Raymore for somewhere I would like to live someday. I'm here. I love the people. I love living in Meadowood. I do have some concern about rental people are good people until I don't know what causes the change, a culture of some kind, but I don't want to have to worry about walking outside and not closing my garage door. I don't want to worry about drugs. I lived across the street from a drug dealer. I did not turn him in because his dad had a job, and I didn't want his dad to lose the job. And that is another reason why I'm in Raymore. I love Raymore because it's a good town, and I know you love it too, and just take that into consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Carrie LaBelle. I live at 1716 Bobcat Court. I, too, was not going to speak tonight. And all I'm going to say is I love Raymore, too. I came to Raymore to start my family, and I have successfully raised my family. I have a senior, I have a sophomore, and I have a sixth grader. I live, and I will live right next to that. I will see that out my backyard. And I'm going to ask you guys, are you willing to live right next to that? Are you willing to sell your homes and buy the houses that are just being built? Because if you're not, why are you going to make me? And why are you going to make my neighbors? And everybody here has told you that even if I didn't live that close, I don't want this here. It's too much in such a little space. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I'll allow, there's a lot of stuff that you guys have provided with us tonight. To run down through, we're talking about property value, traffic, security, schools, density, renters, noise, congestion, real estate value, FEMA floodplain, a voice of the people, 10 years down the road, what's it going to be? Utilities, water flow, aesthetics, again, the floodplain. A lot of these multiply mentioned. Cerner and Honeywell have been focused on as the target regions, as said for by the developer. Buffering's not adequate. Schools are not on board. It is asking the developer to consider downsizing. There are a couple of other notes I've taken here because I ran out of blank sheets of paper here from folks that have mentioned things tonight. But I think it does offer the staff and or the developer at this time to potentially talk about some of those things, because I think there are some misperceptions about what's going on here, about the buffering and the water and the aesthetics and 10 years out and all that stuff. So does the developer wish to make any counter comments at this time?
Jake Lovelace, and so I know you guys have heard a lot of testimony, so I'll try to be brief here. I'll speak for just a minute, and then I'll have Jeremy jump up here and address a handful of civil questions. So one of the comments that I heard was in regard to step-down zoning. So why this zoning designation in this area in particular? It's our belief that this is an appropriate step-down zoning for this tract of ground. You are abutting to single-family residential, going to attached single-family residential, moving across the street to a high-density, high-use commercial entertainment district. So again, we believe that this use fits the area that was set aside in the MOU and continues to be the plan for that area. With regards to the type of tenants that we're going to potentially have out here, just some quick math for you guys while I was sitting here listening to some of the home valuations and things like that. A $300,000 home mortgage with 5% down is $1,485 a month with our current interest rates. So again, these are people that choose to rent out here. We talk about how we don't have millennials that live out here. Do we have housing product that fits their needs? That's the whole reason why we're here, and that's the reason why we're willing to invest $25 million in this potential property. Millennials have student debt, they have a preference to rent, but this is your future residents of Raymore, whether it's in a rental unit, in a rental home that we have for them, or when they move out to find their single family home that they want to live in, or attached family home that they want to live in and own as their own. I heard some more about property values and about how the comparison that the city put together and the comparison that we put together were not apples to apples as far as what we would be producing on this particular development. So I didn't choose to speak about it in our presentation, but I do have data at what's occurred over in Lee Summit at the residences in New Longview and Longview. So the residences at New Longview were constructed in 2015. From 2015 to 2019, the property values actually increased more significantly closer to that property, that mixed-use property that's there in that area where you have commercial districts. 14 to 24% is what those property values increased over the 2015 to 2019 time period. And anybody's welcome to go and look that up on Jackson County property assessors. I heard about security again, and again, I just wanted to mention one more time, this is going to be a minimum of 2 staff members out there full-time. Very likely that we'll have staff members that live on property out there, so it's not like this is a location where we set it and forget it. We have people out there every single day. Jeremy, I'll ask you to come up here and talk a little bit about buffers and about flood zone and all those things.
Jeremy Powell. And let's start with the development in the floodplain. The city had a stream assessment done in October 2018, and one of the requirements, and as part of our MOU, is that we are to do no development within the floodplain. Throughout this design process, we have looked at that and kept that in mind. We currently have that eastern walkout building setting a minimum of 6 foot above the base flood elevation. And the base flood elevation is a computed elevation in which the flood water is anticipated to rise during a base flood. So the minimum that the FEMA requires is 2 foot. We have it set at a minimum of 6 foot. So we are not concerned with any flooding at this point. In the way of stormwater detention, that whole eastern side is a buffer, along with that, there is 6.35 acres, or 27% of the entire site is set aside for native vegetation and stormwater detention. There are 2 dry detentions proposed and 1 wet detention. That is also in there is native vegetations of over 2 acres, along with the existing tree lines that is on the city property, so there will be no disturbance to that. We will also, as in finding of fact number 8, the nearest resident is 270 feet from this property line. We've given an additional 6 acres of buffer on top of just from the edge of the property line to the nearest residents. And I did want to come back to that type A buffer. I did look it up in more detail, and that will be along the entire north property line. And that is 1 small tree planted on 30-foot center, with a 6-foot high evergreen shrub planted on 4-foot centers. So those are going to be a pretty substantial buffer along the entire north property line. And then when you factor in the entire east side is buffered, I don't see how it's going to be an eyesore to anyone in the surrounding area. And I'll stand for any questions that you may have of me.
Thank you. Does staff have anything to add at this time?
At this point, we do not have any specific comments, sir.
All right. All right, well, I'll close the public hearing at this time. And let me find my place on the agenda here. Is there any further questions of staff at this time? Ms. Abdel, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering, Chief Zimmerman, do you have any, one of the big concerns from people is crime. And we know you're on top of crime here in Raymore. So do you have any statistics that might help us think about this as far as crime in different communities, different neighborhoods in Raymore? Any information about crime and density, housing density? Do you have anything you could add that might help us as we think about this?
Well, I would like to look into it further for the council, possibly at the next meeting. I do know I live in the Manor Homes of Eagle Glen, and I do know that we did some looking at specific neighborhoods, the numbers of calls that we make in preparation for this meeting. Obviously, probably not a surprise to anyone that our highest call for service location is Walmart. And so when the gentleman spoke about stealings in our community and those types of calls, the vast majority of those calls occur obviously in a commercial area, but just to use my neighborhood, the Manor Homes of Eagle Glen, that is probably the highest density in our community, but one of the lowest call for service locations in the area. So I don't have anything specific as far as those types of calls. Obviously, stealing is a very serious crime, but as the gentleman mentioned, there are all sorts of other crimes that are higher in the hierarchy of the types of crimes that we respond to. So, we certainly have, all sorts of single-family dwellings that we respond to many, many more times than we do those calls in the Manor Homes of Eagle Glen. So, certainly if the council would like for me to look at something specific types of crimes and that sort of thing, obviously we're able to do that.
Okay. Yep.
So based on information you have, higher density does not equal higher crime?
Not necessarily.
Thank you. Mr. Serco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is for Mr. Sherborne. I know people asked this and they were worried, but I read that on the question about selling units, and we have here that, as Love said, not without city approval, is being planned to develop right now. There is no opportunity to separate any units off. The city would have to approve any type of sale in the future if these units are built. Is that correct?
I'm going to ask Mr. Gress
Mr. Gress.
to address that particular one relative to the PUD.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. To answer your question, sir, one of the main differences between the proposed PUD and the majority of the other similar developments that the city currently has within its housing stock is that the majority of those other properties have already been, or were when they first developed, split up into individualized units. What you're seeing here is a total of 6 individual lots that house anywhere from 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 individual buildings within them. In order for this property to be individually platted and sold, essentially the applicant or the developer would have to come back at a later date to essentially do what we would call a replat or a lot split, which would have to go through both Planning and Zoning Commission or City Council to get their final approval in order to individually divide up not only individual buildings, but individual units within those buildings themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Grass.
David, is there a timeline that's associated with that? I mean, we've heard the term 10 years. I mean, but I guess that's probably, from the developer's perspective, the potential for the timeline for the build-out. But can you delineate on, because I've heard 10 years before an opportunity for resale on that under the guidelines of the PUD.
I don't believe within the PUD we restrict it to any certain timeline that they would have to either wait or reach a certain threshold of homes before they could do that. They could certainly request it at any time, but again, it would have to come back through Planning and Zoning and City Council for the review and approval for that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Farrar, I have a quick question. When it comes to we're in budget season, and we currently have the draft budget that we've been looking at, and staff has given you their input on what's appropriate for their various departments, and come up with the budget that you presented to us for us to kind of review. So when staff is developing their stats, and as we have here, findings of fact that's presented with this particular project, what sources and this is, I don't want to say it's rhetorical, but in your opinion, what sources are being used as empirical sources to substantiate the facts. We've heard tonight the U.S. Census was used. We've heard from different individuals in the audience that has come before us and given us that, as I'm hearing, property values have risen or have declined. It has no bearing on, or it has some bearing on being next to multifamily. In some cases, it doesn't. So how am I to opine or make a decision on a particular project when presented with facts, but then the facts are challenged as not being accurate, or the statistics, I can sway those however I would like based on which data point I want to use. So when it comes to presenting a packet to us and it has findings of fact, how do you delineate or decide on which source to use? So I'll reiterate my question. When it comes to presenting cases before the council, and in particular this one, we've heard a lot of facts and statistics. When it comes to this particular project, we've heard different conversations about the impacts to house values next to multifamily apartments, duplexes, in the forever referenced Skyview area of our community. We are currently in budget season. We have the budget book, the budget for the city for FY 1920, which staff went through exhaustively for several months to put together their recommendations and then developed out and presented it to us at last work session. So now that we have that, and all those statistics and facts were put together to substantiate the requirement, as in this case, we hear findings of facts that were given. So when it comes to those findings of facts and sources, what do you utilize to substantiate the source? Because I hear in one element that the values of houses has no bearing on next to multifamily, but in other arguments, it does. Yes, in the past 10 years, the entire housing market and the entire economy has risen, and it lends itself to rising tide, rise all ships. I can concede to that. But when it comes to making a decision and having to determine what's appropriate, how do you use, and what do you allow as being sufficient source for facts?
As Mr. Gressett indicated, we use the United States Census. Those are black and white figures. Whenever we're doing any sort of budgeting associated with this, we will be using the county numbers for assessed valuation. What we know from historical trends is occurring relative to, for instance, the one line item that I brought up to the council within the budget that is very impactful to this discussion tonight is the number of residential permits that we will be seeing next year. What we know is that there has been a significant and sharp decrease in the number of permits that are associated with residential housing. That's just a fact. That's on our books. We can look it up, and we can do trend analysis relative to what that is going to be. For the current year that we're in, that ends on October 31st, we had budgeted for, we thought we had conservatively budgeted for 125 new single-family home starts. It's going to be very touchy if we get to 95 of those. So a substantial decrease in the demand for single-family homes. If the demand was there, the builders would be building them so that they could sell them. That particular residential building permit also encompasses, of course, multifamily and attached single-family, such as is being proposed by the developer tonight. The particular line item that is associated with that will actually come in above our budgeted amount, because while we had this decrease in single-family home, we saw a substantial increase in the number of permits being requested for either attached single-family or multifamily. Next year, we anticipate that that particular budget line item will rise, because we will also see those permits for the lofts over off of Fox Ridge. The sources for assessed valuation, we draw that specifically and directly from the county. We go to county GIS, and we're able to look up any and all properties and what the increase in assessed valuations has been associated with each of those properties. We use that extensively. Those probably the most germane to that apply to this particular discussion tonight, sir.
Thank you. And I just wanted to, from my own understanding, for the audience and for those who have sent me numerous, emails and phone calls on it, and it speaks to the not in my backyard arguments and opinions, but I just need to clarify on how our facts, when it comes to certain things, are being compiled by the city staff and presented to us as council to make a decision, because everyone has an opportunity. I have an opportunity as well to do my own research and analysis to determine, make my own opinion. But as I hear the conversation, I hear the reports, I just want to make sure, as we're making decisions on a host of things, that we're consistent in how we're utilizing and where we're getting our information from to present to us in the council. And it's just not we're not just cherry picking information to make it, to present it in favor of an opinion or against an opinion of a particular agenda item. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Mr. Crass. In the last, let's just say 10 years, has FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers changed the floodplain more than 3 times or twice in the United States, the designation of what a floodplain is? Because I'm looking at a website that says 2013, 2012, 2011, 2010, 2009, 2008, 2007, and there's changes. It says the available compendium of flood map changes. So I just wanted to address the part where people said their homes were built on a floodplain at the time those permits were pulled. Since then, those definitions have changed considerably. Am I correct?
Well, while FEMA has revised the maps, there have not been significant changes to the floodplain boundaries within the city of Raymore. And I would also point out that while there are numerous areas where there is parts of lots within the floodplain, there are no structures in the city of Raymore that are within the floodplain.
I'm sorry, the public hearing is closed.
No, I will bring my letter.
Okay. All right. Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also have a question for Mr. Gress. Before I do, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight and being here and sharing your opinions with us. Obviously, there are some different opinions in this room. Somebody mentioned earlier, I wrote it down, that they love their community. I think I heard that at least once in this room tonight. I would say that's probably the opinion of everybody in this room, especially us up here on the dais as well, too. We also love this community. I think tonight was a great example of what citizens in a great community can come together and have differing opinions and express them professionally. So again, I want to thank you tonight for your opinions and being professional. Mr. Gress, I saw the master plan being referenced in here, and it's possible that I missed this, and it's a small question, but are any of these, I know we're trying to attract the millennials, and certainly there'll be people of all ages living here, but are any of these zero entry or have any modifications for handicap accessibility?
At this point, sir, great question. The information that's been shared with the city relative to this specific project where it's at in that process now is all very preliminary. So there has been no discussion on the ADA accessibility. Obviously, there are standards that the federal government has that properties must abide by. But at this point, there have been no discussions on the accessibility or the design of the properties themselves. Staff has not seen any specific building plans or construction plans for these properties at this time.
And that's something that people will see on the final plat if it comes to that point in the process.
That specific information would be more relative to the specific building plans that our building official would see, not necessarily public information that's readily available for consumption. But certainly if there was a request for that information, if somebody was interested in doing that, that information could be made available. One thing I'll mention, and I don't want to speak for the applicant by any means, but as you mentioned, there is the opportunity for additional finishes to be put into these units. And so while I can't certainly speak for the applicant and that will be what will happen, but there is the possibility to make certain accommodations if a resident or a tenant would request to do so.
All right, thank you. And just one final thought. I know the majority of the crowd from this room lives in close proximity to this proposed development. I've also heard a lot from other people throughout the city. I live in Ward 4. I'm nowhere close to this at all, and this has very little effect on the ward that I live in directly. But I've heard even from constituents in my ward that they simply don't think this is the best use for that property. So again, I want to thank everybody for their emails and for showing up tonight and expressing their concerns. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Holman? Mr. Barber, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll concur with everything John said except about best use. I understand there's some folks that, this is going to affect them. They feel like it is. But there's been a lot of speculation go on, so I'm going to speculate a little bit here. Bear with me. Mr. Grass, this originally, I'm looking at the original plot or MOU from 1994, and this was R2 attached, correct? So if the applicant did not get this approved and we approved this for R2 attached, there would be nothing that would keep the applicant from going in and building duplexes in that area and selling them individually to investors, 6 at a time, 4 at a time, 2 at a time. Am I correct?
You are correct. However, in order to do that, in order to rezone it from its current agricultural zoning classification, the applicant would have to go through this very same process to get that R2 designation in order to do that.
Right. And the issues that we've had with some of our areas, my office is on Skyview. I'm quite aware of Skyview. There's 48 units there. If you do the math, that's 192. That was the problem with that development, is it was broken apart. There wasn't a PUD, and we had individual owners. Some of those down there look nice. Some of them don't, and it's because it's all broken up. This plan takes an account for that, so we don't have that happen. Am I correct?
You are correct, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Holman?
I also had a question. The next step of the process would be a final plat for this property. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there typically are at least some changes between preliminary plat and final plat. Is that a fair assessment as well?
Correct, sir.
Okay. And I also noticed this question may be better served towards the developer, but they've been obviously taking notes. I've watched throughout the meeting. They are taking into account the things that they've heard, and I think that they are probably making some assessments on what changes they could make to address the situations. Will that enter into the discussions between you and them between now and final plat should this pass tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Circo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One more thing. I know I heard discussion, and I was doing my due diligence looking at this. That plot of land from the MOU, and they talked about R2, and we're talking R3, but some people say they'd like to get the single-family detached homes in it. And I'm thinking, with all that commercial property zoned across the street in the south, I could not see any builders or buyers that ever want to come and build single-family detached homes there with all that congestion of commercial that's planned for that area. So obviously, for that land of area, maybe R3 would probably be appropriate to get zoned, because I couldn't see people wanting to build there across from all that commercial zoning. I don't know. Mr. Gass, what do you think?
I would agree with you, sir. And during my staff report and presentation, I mentioned the utilization of land use transition, land use buffers, natural buffers that provide screening and visual mitigation from any impacts for the separation of sensitive land uses from other high intensity uses. So I would absolutely agree that the sentiment that single-family homes would be built here would not be a desirable location for the majority of single-family home builders that we've seen, just based on the pure location of the property.
Are there any other questions of staff or the developer? not, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of the first reading of Bill. Excuse me. I'd entertain a motion of first reading of Bill 3484.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3484, rezoning the venue of the Good Ranch.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3484. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take first crack at this. This is in my ward, and I don't want to steal any thunder from comments, and we'll probably roll over some of the same comments with regard to this particular agenda item. I've heard from a lot of the residents within Ward 1. I've heard and read all of your emails. I've listened to all of your voicemails. I apologize if I have not responded to everyone in kind or called everyone back in kind, but I did hear at the Good Neighbor meeting on the 7th. I did hear and watch the video on the 20th with P&Z, and I hear you tonight. And as I look at and hear the reoccurring themes, as the mayor articulately recited back from tonight's comments, and they are the undercurrent of the concerns with this particular property when it comes to the opinion on the crime, when it comes to the traffic, when it comes to the stormwater, when it comes to the schools and the overcrowding of the schools. I hear the concerns, and I'm concerned as much as you are with respect to that. But then within the same breath and the same token, we're also as a staff, as elected officials, we also listen to the greater citizens of Raymore. And we do that through our surveys, we do that through our community conversations, so that we can get the direction that this community would like us to go. Once we have that direction and we analyze the information, staff takes that and develops strategic plans, they develop goals. They start to take action on that overall direction. So how do we get here to where we are today? It's based on that direction that we've heard from the overall community. I hear that in this room, there's no millennials in this room. I hear from my constituents, some of you voted for me, some of you didn't. I don't know, that's a rhetorical statement. But this particular community development plan, this land use plan, granted it was from 1994, the planning principles that are in existence in that plan appears to be in existence today and are holding fast to a best practice today when it comes to how do you separate commercial from residential. The land currently as it's zoned is agricultural. On the commercial side, on the west side of Dean, this particular property is agricultural. It's not, how would you put, zoned as a park or zoned as, what is the term, a nature preserve. So it's subject to development. The landowner has an opportunity to decide how he would like to parse the land up. But fortunate for us, there was a vision back then that has changed, which allows the input, the installation of the meadows and Meadowwood, and that's been successful products. The developers who built that out, as evidence in this room, everyone who enjoys those communities. Part and parcel of the reason I moved to where I am in Timber Trails is because of what I look out my window and as I run the community and see the residents in that community. As I walk through that community and realize that it wasn't strictly a 55 and older or senior living community. Did not know that when I was looking to buy. So our communities, it's as it was said tonight, we're a bedroom community. We were considered a bedroom community in '94, even with the growth that we are now over 21,000 residents, and we're still saying we're a bedroom community, even with all that growth. Even with our roads have now, Lucy Webb has been paved. Dean has been, it was before my time. And that managed growth, operative word, managed growth, allows us to still have that opinion of being a bedroom community. And that came with being able to consider a community of all ages. As Mr. Cataract serves on the mark, and he has serves within his staff on a community of all ages, considering all ages and abilities. Despite whatever this vote may be tonight, I would challenge you to stay to listen to the next agenda item that takes into consideration a community of all ages. As I hear the sentiments and all the emails and all the conversations tonight, the term renter is used as if you're drinking sour milk. The term multifamily and attached single family is used as if it's you ate a sour piece of food. The children who happen to live in this, should this pass and should it get built out, the children who may live in that community, are we going to cross the street when they walk to Stonegate? That's the sentiment, that's the undertone I hear. If we were to build similar number of buildings but convert them to single family, we're okay with that. If we were to remove a few buildings and call them to be duplexes, owner occupied, we're okay with that. Some of the conversations I've been a part of. But because it's renter, and because crystal ball down the road, whether that be based off of empirical data seen using the half-mile strip of road, and let's call it Skyview as our litmus test, our city has survived its growth to where it is today within its current, 17 square miles that it is today, and we're still a bedroom community. And whether our children, as my daughter graduates in a couple of years from Rockhurst, decides to move back and raise her family here, as I'm sure, as I've heard tonight, many of you, your families have, we're a victim of our own success. We're a victim of the success of our growth. And it's very concerning when I hear, however we move forward with this, a particular piece of land. What we seem to have overlooked as we look at the staff report, I think there's currently 5 subdivisions under development currently in Raymore. And I wouldn't ask Mr. Crash to kind of swag a number of how many plots that would be, how many homes that would be. Don't hear anyone barking about the impact on schools there. Go across I-49 into Belton. That's our school district. What's that? Traditions, I think, is that community over there that's, has some plots there. Peculiar, as we heard in the Joint Cities meetings, they're growing their community in housing. They're in our school district. When they're planning and zoning, have applications for development, whether it be single family, attached, multifamily, whatever you want to call it, similar concerns about the school size. Don't hear the public outcry. We are a welcoming community, and I challenge each one, no matter whatever the outcome of this particular agenda item is, we continue to be a welcoming community. We continue to patronize their yard sales, and wherever there is a single family attached multifamily home built, because that's why we are still a bedroom community. That's why we have, the growth allows us to create Centerview. These individuals don't pay property tax. The landowner does. When they sign their lease and move in, they're going to pay utilities. That's a tax. When they patronize our local businesses, that's a sales tax. Goes towards the school. So I don't know, as I ask staff on the statistics and how we use and what we use to substantiate the source, because I hear the arguments, and then I challenge myself to ask staff, okay, so what is your source for these statistics? I would assume those in the public are using or referencing the same, but I also have to make sure that, is staff, doing similar. I don't have the history of men in this room. You've grown up here, as I heard several of you have grown up in this community when it was dirt roads. I moved here in 2010, and I enjoyed it, and in that short time, it's changed. This conversation, this input, which prompted me to serve on the dais to help propel and continue that same feeling of community. I don't, so Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Townsend did an awesome job, an excellent job in covering a lot of the points. I'm also the councilman in Ward 1. School overcrowding, traffic, stormwater, property values, Section 8. I've heard wildlife. Small town, don't want it to change, doesn't need it to change. Property density, we were never informed. This is a 55-plus area. We don't like renters, and increased crime. Those are some of the things that I have been emailed over the course of the time. I will tell you, probably the ones I focus on most is school overcrowding, traffic, stormwater, property values. I'll probably stop at that. The reason I focus on those is, some of you may or may not know, I was on the council from 1998 to 2007. This is the 36th time I've gone through a planning and zoning process. And it's not been unusual to go through something similar to this. Growth seems to be painful for the people who live out here because it's a fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. Are you really going to take care of us? It seems to be innate in our culture to mistrust the government. Never mind that we do live with you. I live in Timber Trails. I have multifamily housing on either side of me. Someone asked me the other night, would you move down here? Yeah, absolutely I would. I'm not looking to buy a new house. I'm fine where I'm at. But I drove down through there. My policy when I go through this, I do my due diligence. I actually checked on the school overcrowding, and I was told it wasn't going to be an issue. The problem that you have in those situations, and the problem that we've had in past, is people still say they don't believe you. School superintendent, maybe he said that, but he didn't mean it or whatever. Stormwater, we have professionals that we employ constantly here that have been with us for years, and that's staff. They do this for a living. I'm willing to listen, and I have read every email I got. I have listened to every voicemail I received. Interestingly enough, everybody's talking about communications. Let me tell you something. Nobody called me and said, can we talk about this? Not one person. Nobody here tonight called me and said, can we talk about this? Why not? Why didn't you? Communications is kind of a two-way street. If you had a question, call me. I got one, I'll back up from that. I got one call over the weekend from a gentleman. I took his voice message. I called him back, and I didn't get a return call. I'll say this. There's a couple of different elements in planning and zoning, and one of them is emotional and it's passion. You obviously are very emotional and very passionate about it, and certainly nobody can hold you at fault for that. Passion, I consider passion to be a good thing. I wish we could have talked a little bit more about it, as I just said, but that isn't quite the way it worked out. When I go through this, there's the passion side, and I've been asked when I've run for office before, how do you make a decision? Well, what I tell them, because I see this almost every time, there is the passionate side, the emotional side, and then there is the factual side. When you guys are signing contracts, which would you go with? We recently had in front of us some folks who were looking to bring chickens into the city. They were very passionate about it. But I couldn't get on board with the facts that they were presenting. I trust our staff to give us the facts. You just heard Councilman Townsend kind of grill them a little bit. Hey, well, how'd you do this? And you got the answers. You heard what they had to say. Absent contradictory information and data, I have to go with the data and the information I have that I consider to be accurate. Doesn't mean I don't want to be your voice, as has been brought up, but it also means that I have to, you get to the point where you have to do the right thing. As a quote from Harry Potter was, soon we will all have to decide to make a decision between what is right and what is easy. The easy way, quite candidly in my opinion, is to vote where the heat is coming from, which we saw the other night. There's an MOU with this. Ms. Benson brought up that she knows that the growth master plan has been changed periodically to accommodate certain developments. And I saw the letter. I'm sure you all did too. Just to tell you how I work, I called staff. Can you check on this? Did this really happen? If it did, I need to know. Nobody can find any information on that. I said, so then I asked him, has that ever happened when there's been an MOU attached to that property? No, nobody can find it. Section 8, there is no such thing as putting in a Section 8 housing. You can get Section 8 for a house, for an apartment, but there isn't anything that's referred to as Section 8. Section 8 can actually be in your own neighborhoods. As I said, I zoned I was involved with 35 zones. I didn't zone them myself, obviously. The council's involved. The Meadows was one of them. And I heard the same thing then that I'm hearing now. There's a lot of houses out there, right? You're going to overcrowd our schools. How are you going to handle the traffic? Dean isn't ready for this. What about stormwater? You're going to put in a lot of asphalt out there, right? Heard the same thing. I've heard the same thing on all of them. When we worked on Creekmore, I had neighbors coming up and asking me, so have you approved Creek No More? When we were looking at the zoning, the area where we now have, it was Galleria, where we now have Lowe's and Sam's, we had, and by the way, I know all of you think this is a great showing, no question. I do agree with my fellow council members, and I'm glad that you came up. We had a petition of 6,000 on that, and we had people lined up around here and out into the street. And we were going to take away, one of the big things was we were going to take away Raymore's version of the Plaza Lights because the Deans decorated their house every year. Schools, all my kids have come up through Raymore. They have, all of them have graduated Ray-Pec High School. My oldest grandson graduated last year. I've been heavily involved in schools. The schools are currently using, or well, were using, it may not be anymore, a set from KCTV that I donated them for their media class. Like everybody else, this city means a lot to me as well. And I just want you to know that as we move forward, hopefully we can all continue to work together, regardless of how this comes out, that we can all move forward and work together on this. So that's all I have, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to address the schools issue. I'm the in-school suspension teacher at the high school. I've been the in-school suspension teacher for the last 10 years. I know every crime that's happened on Ray-Pec schools for the last 20 years. I can't say any of it, can't discuss, it's all juvenile stuff, but I know, and when I work with kids, I'm trying to convince them that they need to graduate, whatever course they take, because every kid that drops out is a detriment to our whole community, as well as their future children that they may or may not have and wherever they decide to live. The kids that drop out, they will get together and try to find a place to live with multiple people. This development would not allow that because every single person would have to be on the lease to be in that situation. But let me address the schools. The school district, first off, last Tuesday we had a joint cities meeting in Centerview. Superintendent, the president of the school board, we had community members, elected officials from Peculiar, from the county, and 3 of the people on the dais as well as the city manager were there. I kind of casually, after the meeting was over, tried to prod any of the school board members or the superintendent to make any mention of this. They wouldn't take the bait. They wouldn't talk about it. And I felt like that it wasn't a concern for them, but what they did talk about is this August, right now, they are establishing a planning committee to have a long-range facility plan. They want people to come and be a part of that. They want people to come in September to collect data so they can get information. Here are the cities that I have students from: Belton, Peculiar, just the county, Jackson County, I'll add that too. So Cass County, Jackson County, Harrisonville, Pleasant Hill, Lee Summit, and I have had a kid from Cleveland. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other small communities that are part of our district. We can't shepherd the schools. I would love to, but they don't allow me to do that as a teacher. I do what I'm told to do. But that part of this is not a consideration. Things will be built in all these other communities that we may or may not like, but we don't live there and we have no say. They are part of our school district, so I wanted to kind of move that to the side and address the other situations. But anyway, I just wanted to give that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sturco.
I know it's getting late, so I want to touch on another factor. We all love our city. We love where we're going. We have the Hawk Ridge Park. We build these things. We got great roads, great people. You know, we have that because we find the financial structure to do it. And when I say that is, we have a great economic development. Mr. Tapp, our city people, they work hard, the mayor all the time, to work on commercial to come here because we need the tax base. But everybody loves what we have, and a lot of people around us are jealous of the Raymore and what we have and what we can show to the people, and it's great. But when you look at tax base, we got this commercial land, we're working so hard, but we need that financial structure. The city cannot grow forward for the city and the people. We need to work together. We need to look at ways to do that because we're on our budget. We look at our new 2020 budget. We don't want to tax the people. We want to get commercial where it needs to be, and we'll get that tax base, and that's what we need. All cities do. But when you talk to commercial, you know what the thing they tell you? You got a great location, got a great place. Are you growing on people, what they call rooftops, heads, families? How have you grown? How are you doing? How are the next 5 years? Oh, we want to slow. We're not going to grow people and families. We don't want to do it. Commercial says, hey, you got a great place, but we'll go down the street. We want to make sure that you're growing positively on that structure of rooftops and people and families because they know they'll get that financial support. But we need the commercial. We need to work to get the people in because that's what they look for. I don't think a lot of people understand that. We got great staff. The mayor, Matt, they go out here and work so hard, and their commercials interest is coming, but we have to have it. But we need people because they don't want to see a stagnant city that's quit growing because commercial business coming into the future, even on 49, a great opportunity in North Cass. They don't want to come if we're going to not grow families and people. So I think people need to understand it. We need to grow into the future. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to simply concur with the comments of Councilmember Townsend and Jacobson. I think they were well spoken this evening. And I would like to say that I have heard all of you. I have read all of your emails. I have read the entire packet numerous times. I've highlighted a number of sections and I've asked a number of questions. To me, it simply comes down to this. This body must make decisions and we must be arbitrary and we must follow the empirical evidence provided to us. Bottom line, I believe that the developer is an honest man. I believe that he will keep his word and he will develop this development into a nice development. It will be well maintained, and I believe the empirical evidence provided to us by staff and their research. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Abdelgawad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will agree. I think that my fellow council members have made great points, and just really quickly, I want to thank all of you for coming here tonight. As Mr. Berenson said, you're obviously very passionate and caring about Raymore. I want you to know that you have been heard. We are listening to you, and I admire your work, your diligence in fighting for what you believe in, for what you think is right, for what you feel like is happening in your backyard. I do, though, want to say that I feel like it's as others have said, it's our job to make our decision based on facts and not assumptions. And I hope that should this move forward, you all can have a different vision of rental properties, of renters, than the assumptions you've made now. In my family, I have several people who have chosen to be renters. My aunt, my sister, who are professional women that work and get paid a lot of money in Kansas City, who choose to rent. They don't have children, they don't have trashy yards, you know.
Please.
So your assumptions of renters maybe aren't accurate for what this will bring to our community. I work in education, and I know we're changing education because because of the global economy, because the workforce is changing. What businesses are wanting is changing, and we hear from, looking at how we're preparing our high school students, we're looking at how we need to teach them differently, how we need to train them differently, and part of that has to do with the global economy and jobs that don't stay put like the jobs we've gotten as older people. And so the new jobs have people moving, they have people traveling a lot more maybe than we did. I think a lot of your questions have been answered tonight, and I hope that you'll trust the facts, the evidence that have been shared tonight. But ultimately, thank you for sharing your opinions. Thank you for being so passionate about this city. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Anyone else? If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? 7 yes, 1 no, motion passes. Okay, please have the first reading of Bill 3485 by title only.
The first reading of Bill 3485 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Pinnacle Homes of Kansas City for the universal design and residential home construction pilot project.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Cataret to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Mr. Gress?
Yes, sir. Thank you. City staff is pleased to announce the culmination of a project that we've been working on for several months now, in fact, even several years. If you think back to 2017, actually when I first got here, the very first thing that I worked on was the development of a Community for All Ages master plan that was essentially solidifying all the work that took place before me with Mr. Cataret, our Planning and Zoning Commission, our Park Board, and even you all in consideration and participating in the Mid-America Regional Council's Community for All Ages program. That is a program that strives to meet the needs of an increasingly diversifying population in terms of age, housing choices, as we heard tonight, health concerns, mobility issues, et cetera. Within that plan, there was a number of goals that address those issues: transportation, housing, health and communities, and parks and recreation, outdoor spaces, et cetera. One of the specific topics that we chose to focus on right out of the chute was housing. If you think back, shortly after that plan was adopted, an ordinance came before you all that dealt with accessory dwelling units and making those a lot easier and more accessible for particularly older folks that might want to remain in our community that might not be able to do so in a single-family home, but they want that ability to live independently, but with the support system that they might need. Unfortunately, since then, there hasn't been the interest that we thought that there would be with that, but we've continued to work and chip away at a lot of the goals that were included in that plan. One of the specific goals that was actually talked about back in November of 2018 during a work session that I participated in with you all was the presentation of the idea of a universal design pilot project to educate the community and the residents and the building community about what universal design is, what the benefits are, what the barriers are, what the challenges are with that. And in doing so, we proposed the idea of formulating an idea or partnering with a local home builder to create a showcase of a home that would be able to demonstrate those different features and those different principles of what universal design is, how it can be incorporated into the design of a home, and the financial impact that could have when those choices are made on the front end of the building process versus 10 years down the road when some of those issues start to catch up with our residents as they age in place. And in doing so, we've just earlier last month, staff formulated an RFQ to solicit proposals from local home builders that would be interested in participating with us on this. And recently we went with we received one proposal from a local builder, Pinnacle Homes of Kansas City, that has been very active within our community in building single-family homes. If you're familiar with the Knoll Creek subdivision, Alexander Creek, I even think they built several homes in Creekmore as well. All over the Raymore community, and so we're very thrilled to be working with a local home builder that is evidently, just based on our recent discussions, just as passionate about this work as we are. And so we're pleased to present to you a plan to partner with Pinnacle Homes of Kansas City to work on the construction of a single-family home that incorporates an entire list of universal design features, which are in the staff report for you this evening. As part of that, as part of the incentive to generate the interest that we were hoping to see was to put some sort of incentive on there that would entice the builder to want to participate with us. On top of the extensive social media, PR, and campaigning that our generous communications staff has pledged to do with that builder, our city manager, city council were generous enough to give us the flexibility to waive the permitting and review fees that would often be associated with the construction of a single-family home. That value, estimated depending on the type of the home, is anywhere of upwards of $7,500, which might not seem like a lot in the overall grand scheme of the construction of a home, but when you factor in some of the components that we've asked the builder to incorporate as part of the program in and of itself, and even some of the things that the builders expressed that they'd be willing to do beyond that, we think that the estimated value of $7,500 is a pretty substantial bang for your buck, if you will, in this program. And so it's still very early in the process. We'll continue to work with the home builder on the review and proposal of the specifics of the floor plan that they've chosen. The one thing that stands out about this project is it's not something that's going to take place in a vacuum in a brand new subdivision. It's actually the last lot being proposed in the Knoll Creek subdivision. And so it's again, the builders established a very strong relationship with the residents of that neighborhood and established trust with those residents as far as what that product will be and what that product will look like. And we are ecstatic to be working with Mr. Beck and Pinnacle Homes to facilitate this process and hopefully build a home that will garner attention not only from the community but from the Kansas City area overall. That would conclude staff report on this item. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, David. I know you all have worked on this project for some time. It came up in our talks a year and a half, 2 years ago, when we were talking about the community for all ages. So I applaud this builder and helping maybe see this come to fruition. So I'm excited about the project, and hopefully it'll go through. Mr. Holman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Excellent presentation again, Mr. Gress. You've been called from the bullpen a number of times tonight and done a very good job, by the way. This is exciting to see this come forward. We talked about this. I know you, Mr. Cataract, and the entire community development staff have worked hard on it. I'm glad to see we've got somebody. You touched on it a little bit, but if you say the term universal design, Mr. Cataract knows exactly what that means. Another term you touched on it a little bit is a home for aging in place. So if you could maybe just describe a little bit of, just in minor detail, how the builder changes things so that a person could go from, say, age 35, if they chose to live in that home when they're in their 80s.
Absolutely. So when looking at the concept of universal design, there's really an entire spectrum of what one feature is versus the next feature. It could be something as simple as the door handles that are on the doors within your home, or the fixtures that are on your cabinets that allow you to pull the cabinet open, or the types of drawers that you have in your community. It could be something as large as wider doorways within your home. There's a whole litany of different features that are designed to be used to the easiest extent possible, regardless of one's ability to utilize those features based on any sort of ability.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions of staff? If there's no further questions of staff, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of the first reading of Bill 3485. Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3485, award of contract, Universal Design Pilot Project to Pinnacle Homes of Kansas City.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3485. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. That concludes new business. Now move on to public comments. If anyone in the public would like to address the council at this time, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and try to keep your comments to 5 minutes or less.
Ruth Johnson, 730 Carlisle. I would like to thank the board for that last vote. I've been on the council, or the task force for community of all ages, and I would challenge you to think it's not just about the aging, but you've got parents who take care of children that have physical limitations and may take care of them all their life. You know, we moved from Peculiar 3 years ago because of physical limitations. It's very difficult to find a home in this area that can access those. You know, we took care of an aging parent as well. These homes aren't built for wheelchairs. You know, we're in a villa that has zero entry, but you could barely get her wheelchair down the hallways. These are major deals when you're dealing with issues like that. So thank you for beginning this process of addressing those issues further down the line.
Thank you. Yes.
I'd also like to, my name is Terry Clark, Jeannie. I would also like to commend you on this project. I'm a real estate agent, as you know, in the community. It is very difficult to find a home that is ADA compliant, and the need is there. Again, there's so many, we're the baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer. I'm also a renal transplant recipient where I was in renal failure and basically told to get my affairs in order. For me to find a home for myself here in Raymore that I've lived in this community that I've lived in for over 50 years, it was very difficult. And I think that more attention needs to be paid in this avenue than people really realize. It's not just people who are aging, it's, you know, I was 49 years old when it happened to me. So again, I'm going to go back to my original statement of I think it's imperative that we address the housing industry for those single moms who don't want to take care of exterior components of a home, and address the ADA compliant issues along with the need that we have in the community for the baby boomers, single parents who don't qualify in a 55 and older subdivision. I think that's really important.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll move on to council communication. Mr. Circle, I'll start with you tonight, sir.
It's late. I think we've talked my way out of it. No comment.
All right. Mr. Burke.
One short comment. We do the Pledge of Allegiance at school every day, and a lot of times, because I'm in ISS, sometimes they just ignore it. But and sometimes they actually stand up, and sometimes they put their hand in their heart. But the sound of all of us doing the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning was really cool. I haven't been in a place with that many people doing it at the same time, even though not everybody agreed on what happened. It was really kind of moving for me, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobson.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm going to go the way of Mr. Circle. I think I've probably spoken enough this evening.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Townsend.
Same. I think I've used my allocation this evening.
Mr. Berenson.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be very brief. Very tough decision tonight. I thanked a lot of people in this room. I did not thank the developer for coming tonight, so sorry, I want to thank you as well. Although we may disagree on a very few things here, I do look forward to working with you and the project moving forward. So thank you to yourself and everybody else.
Mr. Delgawad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll just add to that, thanks to staff. I know you guys have done a lot of work on this project, a lot of research to get information to us and the citizens and the developer. And so just a second to recognize staff for all your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm going to throw out a thank you to you for keeping the meeting in order tonight and keeping it going, even though it is long. But you have a way of doing that, and I appreciate you doing that. And I want to thank staff for being prepared and everything that you guys put together. And I hope we get to move forward. We got another read on this development, but a $25 million investment in Raymore, I'm sure you don't take it lightly. So as you know, we expect a lot, and I think you do as well. So thank you.
Mr. Holman.
I would concur with the comments of all the previous council members, and hoorah to you, sir, even though you weren't a Marine. I don't know what the Navy says. I did have one. I did have one minor comment. I wanted to thank Mrs. Clark. She came up and spoke in opposition to the previous item. The entire.
I wasn't opposed, and I wasn't for. I wanted consideration of that.
Fair enough, but I appreciate you being a well-rounded and informed member of our society and staying for this important item afterwards and coming and giving your comments on that. Thank you. That's all I have, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Holman. I just have a couple of comments tonight. One, I want to apologize to Mr. Gress if some of the comments and Barb's thrown your way over the past couple of weeks seem to have been personal in nature. I don't think the people meant them personal at all. We know your background. We know your great education and your level of integrity, and I want you to know that this elected body appreciates you very much and the hard work that you and Mr. Catterett both put into these types of projects. It's very time-consuming. It's very gut-wrenching at times, and we feel it too, and we did through this project. But I just want folks to know that your integrity is above reproach, and they need to know that. We wouldn't have hired you if you weren't, and I'm sorry that some things were said that may have been hurtful, because you certainly did not deserve that. Same to the rest of the staff. I, as an elected official, expect some of those to come my way, so it just comes with the job. I want to thank Mr. Mustine for the mud run. It was a great success. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I was speaking at the police academy that evening. I wanted to be there. And then to Mike Eakey and Melissa for their hard work on Summer Scene. It was really a great event. Had a great time there. Everybody I saw and talked to was having a great time. And I want to thank you for that. And kudos to you for getting the board, the Arts and Commission group, to recognize our community band and give them support. It really is a worthwhile effort. It was great to see Tasha Moorhead in the group there. She's a great lady. And thanks to everybody for coming out to the Hawk Ridge Park ribbon cutting. It was a great event. I think we had 7 of 8 of us there. And it really was a nice turnout, and I know you're a busy guy. But thank you to everybody. And thanks finally to everybody that showed up for this. I know you may think that this council is misguided in some form or fashion, but we're not. We really do our homework. We really work hard at this. We want to do the right thing. We've got the right people in place. We've got a person interested in that property. I'll tell you right now, Mr. Good wouldn't have sold it to him if he didn't believe in the project himself. And Mr. Otis, who have worked very hard and diligently on preparing that area for commercial growth. It really will be a nice buffer between what we plan commercially there. Mr. Tapp and I continue to work on that economic development in a highly secretive state, unfortunately. I wish you could see what I saw in order to vote the way that I did at Planning and Zoning, because I know that it will, in the end, turn out very nice for everybody. So with that, I don't think we have a reason to move into executive session, do we, Mr. Feuerborn?
We do not, sir.
All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Holman?
I move that we adjourn this session of the City
Is there a
Council
second?
meeting.
I will second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? It's unanimous. We're